We all have different thoughts that go through our mind during our silent meditation when we take that moment to just quiet ourselves and breathe and empty our minds. And I've been teaching here many, many years, and my thought is always that I hope that I represent Dr. Christopher in the best way I can, the clearest reflection, because he was my hero. And he was the greatest man I ever met. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute and my involvement with him in the school. But I thought first I'd just like to tell you a little bit about myself so you would know me a little better, because I have the unfortunate disability of coming in here after the class has already started, so most of you know each other already. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Some of my first dramatic memories in life were my father dying. When I was 11 years old, my father died of a massive coronary in my arms. He had been sick for some time, but I never realized, being that young, how sick he was. And then one cold winter evening in upstate New York, where I grew up with the snow drifts over the roof of the house, he started breathing in a very difficult manner, moaning in a lot of pain, went into a state that was really an unconscious state. He really wasn't aware. And then he proceeded to die. It took about 5 hours for his heart to stop beating. He was in tremendous pain, and as a child, it scared the heck out of me. A few years later, my mother died of a massive heart attack, and a few years later, I was dying of heart disease. And both my parents died at 55 years old, which is quite young. And by the time I was 16, I was diagnosed as having valvular deformities of my heart that were so severe, it was suggested that I have corrective surgery. And I knew they were right, because I started I started noticing that I would have tremendous pounding in my chest, then tightness, then in a few minutes pain radiating down my left arm, and then I'd have to sit down, and sometimes I would actually fall down and pass out. And by the time I was 17, this was happening about 2 times a day on the average. And I was in an outpatient clinic in New York, and I was on drug therapy, and I was scheduled for open heart surgery by the time I was 18 or 19. The doctors suggested that as my body grew to adult size, this weakened heart and the dysfunctional valves would no longer be able to pump the blood through my body and keep me alive. And I knew they were right. I was very, very ill. And I met a wonderful young man in the hospital that had the same problem as I did, and we became best friends, because you tend to associate and meet and get along with people that have the same problems you do. And he was scheduled for his surgery before me. His name was Bob. We were great pals, and he had his surgery. I never saw him again. He died on the table. And a tremendous wave of fear went over my body. And as some of you know, fear can be a great motivational tool. And it was for me, because now I had lost my dad, my mom, my best friend. Here I am alone in the world. I had a brother, but we weren't that close at that time. And I was very, very ill. And I knew I had to do something. But sticking a knife into my heart didn't sound like a healing experience. So I thought, I need to make a decision here. There must be another way. And I remember walking out of that hospital that day. I can still feel it right now, chills when I walked out, because it was like a whole new world. When you're coming close to death, you see things differently. And that's when a series of events began to change my life. And the first one was I ran into a Zen Buddhist monk, and he said to me, well, if you eat less red meat, it'll be better for your heart. I would have eaten donkey manure with battery acid gravy on it if I thought I could do something to get away from the medical profession. So I stopped eating red meat, and I felt better, a little bit better. And then a few months went by, and I heard that if you stop eating other types of meat, that all meat has cholesterol. And I discovered that chicken had as much cholesterol as hamburgers. We'll talk about that later. And I discovered that these so-called cleaner types of meat were still bad for my heart, so I stopped them. And I became what I call a lacto-lacto-lacto-lacto-lacto-ovo-ovo-ovo-ovo-ovo vegetarian, which just means that I ate cheese omelets, cheese sandwiches, eggs, butter, cottage cheese, and more cheese for breakfast and dessert. And I felt a lot better still, and then realized that I was still consuming massive quantities of cholesterol and saturated fats that were blocking my coronary arteries and plugging my heart valves. And so I decided finally to make the move to become a vegan, meaning that I just ate fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and grains. And that was a terrific, terrifying moment, because I remember opening my refrigerator and realizing, okay, there's nothing I can eat now. There's no food. I'm going to live on celery. And it's a bit scary, but at the same time, so is the possibility of dying of heart disease. So I became a vegan, and I felt tremendously better. I remember my first fasting book was Herbert Shelton's Fasting Can Save Your Life. After 3 days on his water fast, I couldn't talk, and I was seeing aliens from outer space in my backyard, and decided that that was not the program that I wanted to do, although I'm not knocking down the natural hygienists and water fasting, but for a first program to do for someone who was toxic, that wasn't a good idea. So I experimented a lot. I finally learned that exercise was something that I needed to do for good cardiovascular health, and I got involved in the martial arts, and I've been involved in the martial arts more than half my life now, 22 years. In New York, I thought it would be good because I thought, well, it'll heal my heart and I'll be able to protect myself at the same time, which is important when you're living in a big, violent city. And I have 3 black belts in different martial arts. I didn't know when to stop. Have injured just about every area of my body that you could possibly hurt. And I still teach martial arts around Los Angeles, and I also do speeches down in South Central LA to interest young, poor people to not eat Jack in the Box. And I have to use my karate and my martial arts to make them want to come and see me, because who would want to come and see someone that's going to tell them to have more bowel movements and eat low-fat food? So I'll do some breaking demonstrations and things. I was the New York State breaking champion in the early 1970s. I broke all the records of breaking in New York. I would do 13 2-inch concrete slabs with my hand. That's why my writing is a bit illegible, as you'll begin to see. And I went up to 18 concrete slabs with my foot, eventually leaping off a platform because I couldn't lift my leg up high enough anymore. I don't do that much anymore. So exercise was very important in being well. And then I also noticed that I had to do something up here, a colonic between the ears, that my family was dysfunctional. And there are emotions that go along with having a bad heart, like hate and love. And I had to learn to be a more loving person and process some of the anger. I was very angry that my parents died when I was young. As an adult, you can rationalize it, but as a child, I was abandoned. My parents left me. I used to have dreams that they didn't really die, that they just dumped me, faked the whole thing, and were living in, Cuba somewhere. And so as a child, you don't rationalize that. So I had to process all that. And that was part of my healing process. But the long and short of all of this is in about 3.5 years, I went back to the hospital. I had 2 electrocardiograms, stress tests, and I even let them do x-rays. And they said that I had a miracle, that I was healed, that my heart valves were perfect, and I should consider myself absolutely blessed. And I realized that I did have a miracle, but I also realized that I earned every inch of the way, of the road that I had traveled to heal myself. And at this point, I was quite fiery, vibrant, healthy, feeling great. And many people started coming around me, asking me what I had done, how I had done this. So I started helping first friends, then relatives, then other people, and eventually started working with people in New York. And my initial mode of therapy was pretty much dietary changes, vitamins and minerals. I gave people vitamins and minerals. And health food stores in the 60s were basically yogurt and sunflower seeds. So I used a lot of sunflower seeds since I didn't use yogurt. And brewer's yeast. I remember lots of brewer's yeast, that real bitter stuff that back then. And I then certified in 8 styles of body work because I liked body work because it was something that healed me in the martial arts, and I could see that I healed other people with it. So I did a lot of body work and a tremendous amount of food programs with people. And then in the early 70s, mid-70s, I decided a pilgrimage to California was the thing for me for a number of reasons. One, mainly, my first reason was eating. I realized that in upstate New York, all the produce that I got, the vegetables, the fruits, was frozen. Even if it was fresh, it was frozen in the trucks on the way to the market because no one has heated trucks to ship vegetables and fruit in. So, you know, you'd get those oranges that you cut in half and there's no juice inside. It's just kind of pulpy and dried out. And everything was horrible. And I realized as a vegetarian, Alaska doesn't seem like a good climate to me, that I need to live in a warmer, more temperate area. So I thought, well, California. Second of all, I wanted to study with Bruce Lee. I thought, I want to meet Bruce Lee and I want to study with him. So that was a second reason to come to California. And a third one is it seemed that this was a congregation or a melting area, Western United States, for a lot of the great natural healers that I had been reading about, Dr. Christopher, Dr. Jensen, even Pavel Rolla, National Health Federation out here, and all these things were going on. So I moved out to California, and this is where I also began work, studying more body work, practicing in California, working with people out here. That's how I made my money. And I continued to study the martial arts for the next 5 years until I finally realized that there's only so much battering the human body can take and that I'll stop doing that. And I actually retired from as a practitioner, and now I just teach. At that same time, I started getting into the wonderful abundance of food that we have out here on the West Coast. And thirdly, I began my study further in natural healing. I first studied with a man named Dr. Kurt Dansbach, who I thought was a wonderful man at the time. He even asked me to work for him, and luckily I saw the light and decided not to do that. And I'll talk a little bit more about his program later. I studied with Dr. Jensen, and I interned with Dr. Jensen. I took every course he ever taught and offered. I had so little money at that point, I slept at the end of his driveway in the bushes, and he never knew that. And I had a little area I hollowed out and kind of slept in there because I didn't have the money to get a room or to pay him to stay there. So I just kind of hung out. He always wondered how I could stay so late and leave and get there so early in the morning. It was easy. I was only 14 feet away from his front door. I tended to be a bit of a parasite, as David even remembers. And I would go to the health shows, and I read a lot of books by Dr. Christopher. And then I remember it was at one National Health Federation convention I saw Dr. Christopher, and that was a moment that changed my life. Because certainly not saying anything negative against any of the other people I mentioned, Dr. Christopher, I don't know how to say it, but it was like the first real person I met who was a natural healer, what it meant to me, how I healed myself. There were no like, I experienced that with a lot of other people. I go, I disappointed myself because then I'd hear people say things that I thought, well, that isn't what I experienced. And Dr. Christopher mesmerized me. It was like, wow. And it wasn't just me. It was about the other 15,000 people that were in that room. He used to get more people than anybody, standing room only. at the National Health Federation. I remember I thought afterwards, I have to talk to this man, and I couldn't get near him. I remember one lady was following him, and she was so desperately trying to get to him, she tripped, grabbed his coat, tore it down half his back to where he was handcuffed, and he just kept this wonderful smile on his face and waded through the crowds, people attaching to him, people hanging on to him. And the reason was because they knew he had something. Here was a man who had practiced for years, knew how to help people get well in one of the most simplistic manners I had seen. It was wonderful. So I remember it took me hours to actually get to see him. And I remember he was sitting in a chair, and I was actually kneeling on the floor in front of him. And I forget what I said. I don't remember. I probably said something stupid and was stuttering. And he said to me, "You need to come to Utah, to the school." And that was it. I thought, that's it. I'll sell the family farm. Whatever it takes, I'm going to Utah. And I came up here in the beginning of the year, and at that time we had an herbalist course. I took the herbalist course, came back up and took the master herbalist course, and at that time we had an herbal pharmacy course, and I took that, and I remember being absolutely awestruck, speechless, sitting in the back of the room, as some of you have probably seen me on videotape, like this, and I never said a word. David's right. And finally I burst, and I remember going to their where they were staying at night, and I said, I want to be part of this school. I want to teach here. I want to do things. And then I remember Dr. Christopher asking me, well, what would I like to do? And I remember rambling off at the mouth for about 2 hours, and he put me to work, which was great, because this was the first. Many people up to that point had asked me to work for them, but this was the first time I was telling anybody I wanted to work for them. And I was just very lucky. This was a turning point in my life, and Dr. Christopher said, great. And he said, Dr. Christopher said, you know, I'll put you to work, and he did. And for a few years, I became what I called Dr. Christopher's android. I remember every word he said I wrote down, memorized. When anybody would think of a formula, B&B tincture, blue cohosh, black cohosh, blue vervain, skullcap, and lobelia equal parts. You know, I mean, I knew every formula, every Latin name. I studied very, very hard. I took the Master Herbalist test 6 times over the year so I could get a perfect score one day. I was a bit obsessed. I admit that. And, but I listened to everything this man said, and it was just a tremendous, tremendous education for me to see the experience of someone who had been practicing for so many years, helping people heal themselves using only natural methods. Wow, that was rare. Everybody else used some natural methods and then a lot of other stuff that was a bit scary. So I began teaching at the school and continuing my practice in California, but it took a big difference at that point, a big change occurred in my practice, because I even looked at everything that I had been doing and even made it simpler, and we'll talk about that in a little minute. Purified my system and really started working with Dr. Christopher's system. And I noticed one thing. The major difference was that people my patients were getting well. People that I worked with were getting well. It worked. And I was a big one on what works. And my friend here in the martial arts probably knows that well. When you're studying the martial arts, it's like, well, this is great, but how does it work? Does it work? We all want things that work. And that's really my job in here, is to share with you my years of experience, and what I've experienced helps people get well. So we can get well, and we can help other people get well. That's really the essence of the next 3 days I'm going to spend here. And I noticed that my patients, my friends, my people, the people that I worked with got well. So this was probably the most phenomenal thing. And then when Dr. Christopher passed away, David asked me to continue with the school. We kept it going, and here it is still going today, and it's kind of exciting to be in Dr. Christopher's house, where I really feel his spirit and his energy always with me, but especially here, so we're kind of honored to be here in his house too. So anyway, that's me. Boy, that's enough talking about myself here. So this morning, what I want to share with you. First, any questions about me? So we can get that out of the way. Martial arts, that's why I wear these clothes. It's very comfortable for me. These are the clothes that I kind of live in and have worn for all my years in the martial arts, and they're all cotton, which is nice. And some people say, well, why do you always wear black? It's negative color, but black was the color of my martial art. And also the Chinese say it's a combination of all colors, that you can see a rainbow in it. So maybe we need to have more carrots. So that's that. Why the long hair? Because I'm a hippie. I grew up in the 60s. I passed out with a needle in my arm at Woodstock. There's a very ugly past here. And that was part of my healing, too. That was part of my awareness into natural healing. I've been absolutely sober and drug-free since I became a vegan, since I was 18 years old. I remember in 1968, I thought Walter Cronkite was the president because I saw him on TV. And my memories are pretty blurry back then. And a lot of my drug taking was all about my pain with my parents and my childhood and all of that. So if any of you wonder, long hair, beads, karate uniform, that's all the things behind this, so I can dispel any bizarre and strange rumors before we start. Okay. Now, natural healing. The wonderful thing that I love about this book is that Dr. Christopher did not call it the Great Book of Herbology. It's called the School of Natural Healing. And it's because Dr. Christopher, if anybody I ever met and studied with, was not only the greatest natural healer, but really understood it, what natural healing is. And it's even more confusing nowadays. What is natural healing? I think before we can figure out what natural healing is, it might be nice to look at what it isn't. Sometimes I like to do that. Let's look at all the things that are out there in medicine and healing and look at what I think, at least, these things are, if they're natural or they're not natural. And again, I'm a very fiery, opinionated person. And I'm going to share with you my strong opinions. But 98% of what I share with you is my reality. I'm not going to teach much out of books. I've brought very few. I'm not going to share with you any theories or any beliefs. I'm just going to tell you what I've personally seen and experienced and give you every herbal formula that I know, every natural healing routine that I know. Well, first of all, it's not allopathic medicine. And this would be a good time to pass these out. I finally have put every handout that I like or use or have made, or even some of Dr. Christopher's, into a book here for you. And let's talk a little bit about modern medicine or allopathic medicine or our traditional MD or the AMA a bit. That's probably the only thing that we do not consider alternative medicine. So that certainly isn't natural healing. And why isn't it natural? Well, the main things that medicine uses, their main modalities of so-called healing, are surgery, pharmaceuticals, or what we call chemotherapy or chemical therapy, and what we would call radiation. Using radioactive substances, using isolated chemical synthetic substances, and using knives are main modalities of the medical world. Really, when you look at surgery, when you look at my clients, we're really looking at mutilation. People are coming in without ears, without noses, without livers, without appendixes, without gallbladders, without kidneys. When we look at chemotherapy, you know, it's interesting that all chemotherapy drugs that are used nowadays in large enough doses cause cancer or degeneration of the body. So really all pharmaceutical drugs and chemotherapy are poisonous. When you look at them, just read the PDR. So these are poisons. And radiation is just, of course, we've all seen people with radiation burns. Radiation is just burning. It's a way to burn things out of the body. I have a lot of case histories to share with you. I brought about 100 patient files in my briefcase. That's what's in here, not my rock collection. And I had a patient recently that had a squamous cell anal malignant tumor on her rectum. I suggested she didn't do radiation therapy. She said the doctors assured her that they would isolate the radiation beam, that they wouldn't hurt her. They radiated her so much in the rectum that they burn out the wall between her vagina and her rectum, and now fecal matter's coming out her vagina. Okay, now I got a lot of scary, spooky stories to share with you, and my job is to make you so fearful of the medical profession that you would never consider going there or sending any of your patients. So radiation is really all about burning. Now when you look at this, this isn't a very nice way to treat people who are sick. Mutilate them, poison them, and burn them. So we won't talk much more about this system of medicine. Some of you might think that I'm being a little bit hard on the medical profession. I do believe that 1% or less of medicine is wonderful. And I do believe that trauma is where medicine should be involved when we get in car wrecks or get run over by a piece of machinery and we need limbs sewn back on. This is where medicine excels. But this is only a small percentage of medicine, and maybe it isn't worth the other part of it. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe we'd be better off just abandoning all of medicine and getting rid of it. We'd probably live longer and have healthier, okay, I can say this, healthier, happier lives. I do believe that 99% of doctors are greedy, ignorant, unthinking butchers. Okay? So if anybody has any doubts about my feeling of the medical profession, that's exactly what I feel. I have friends that are medical doctors, sure. There are a few out there, but most of them are incredibly ignorant of the understanding of the body. Most of them are very greedy. You go to where the doctors park their cars, you don't see a lot of Volkswagens. Okay? You see a lot of Mercedes and Rolls Royces. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have money and enjoy our lives, but to make money by burning, poisoning, and mutilating people, I couldn't sleep at night. And I do believe that the AMA should be called the American Murderers Association instead of the AMA or the American Medical Association. So now that we have clear my views, yes. Yes. Now that we are clear about how I feel about the American Medical Association, the AMA, let's just dump them and not talk about them anymore and forget it. Dr. Christopher was I considered him what I'd call in Southern California a radical dude. I suppose he wasn't described that way much, but he was a very fiery person, very much against the medical profession. You see that in Dr. Shook's books. Dr. Shook was probably wiped out by a medical CIA agent. And you see that most of the great natural healers, as modern medicine evolved, condemned it tremendously because they saw the horrors that went on. So that's it for modern medicine. Now, what about naturopathy or naturopaths? You know, naturopathy really means the natural treatment of disease. Pathy or pathology meaning disease, naturopathy meaning treating it naturally. All the people that call themselves naturopaths and all the schools that teach naturopathy, to me, don't seem very natural. Most of the institutions of naturopathy that I have seen use x-rays, use subcutaneous injections, use all types of things that I think are toxic and hurt people in many ways. The whole idea of natural healing is not using something that could have a side effect that could hurt someone. And I see that done in the naturopathic hospitals. I found this book recently called Essential Formulas for Health and Your Guide to Important Health Topics. And I thought, oh, this is interesting, and it's a new company that's come out with health formulas. But then this was nice. Here's a man's picture, and it says, this is Michael T. Murray, ND, naturopathic doctor. Dr. Murray maintains a private medical practice in Bellevue, Washington, and teaches botanical medicine at Bastyr College of Natural Health Sciences in Seattle, one of our great naturopathic colleges. And he's the professor of botanical medicine, meaning he's the head herb guy, right? Wonderful. I thought, well, we're going to look at some great formulas here. And I noticed they had an immune formula. I thought, oh, this looks really good. Let's look at their immune formula that he's put together. And besides it being all vitamins and minerals, there's vitamin A fish liver oil, vitamin D fish liver oil. And can you imagine that? Getting fish, cutting them apart, taking their livers and putting them through your champion juicer at home or whatever. I mean, that's a pretty gross, disgusting substance, the liver being our organ to process poisons. So I'm wondering, well, taking in fish poison, that's going to help my immune system? And the next thing I saw here was dairy products. In here, various types of calcium from dairy. So now we have the immune system of cows, their hormones, their estrogen, their RNA, their DNA. Whew, that sounds like a bit of a strange thing to take in my immune system. Raw spleen tissue, and raw thymus substance, and raw lung. Get you breathing a little better. So here we have lung, thymus, spleen, dairy products, and fish liver oil in a formula designed by the professor of botany at one of the top naturopathic institutes in the United States. It sounds like an immune nightmare to me. Think about this. This is an immune formula. Nowhere in this formula is there any echinacea or garlic, which I consider the two top immune herbs on this planet. So is this what they're teaching in naturopathic schools? You know, so I condemn this. This is not naturopathy. This is not the natural treatment of disease. This is an immune nightmare. I would suggest that if you took this, you'd probably make yourself sick. And I went on further in this book, and I saw, oh, here's another one. This is for liver toxicity. It's called Livatox. I think they made a mistake, and it's supposed to be to make your liver toxic. They've said this formula. Because it's got liver in it, to be the first thing, and I can't think of a worse thing to do than to eat liver. And it also has ox bile and more fish liver oil and all these wonderful products that I think would make your liver incredibly toxic, overtax it, give it a hard time doing its job, and make you sick. So here's a little proof against at least the, you know, if this was just a student of the Baxter Institute, I'd relax a little bit and say, well, students, you know, get a bit crazy. I've been a bit crazy and been a student of many schools. But this is the head botanical professor at the Baxter Institute putting his name on and designing formulas like this. So I have not been over the years very impressed with naturopathy at all. And when I meet students in the schools of naturopathy, I suggest to them to quit immediately and come to the School of Natural Healing in Utah. Any questions about naturopathy? As we're looking, because what we're really looking at here is what's natural healing? Because all these things, except for medicine, come under the heading of alternative healing. Because really what alternative healing means is anything alternative or an alternative to modern medicine or allopathic practice. So we all get lumped in the same group: naturopaths, homeopaths, chiropractics, psychic healers, 1-900 tarot card. We're all alternative, okay? So our job here to at first is to figure out what we are. Where do we fit in as natural healers? Homeopathy. I'd like to talk a minute about homeopathy. Oh, by the way, this is Anisha over here for those of you that haven't met her. And Anisha is a graduate of the College of Herbology and Natural Healing in Great Britain. She's from England. And I've got her doing about 6 master theses already, because every time she's about 90% complete, I take it for my research and get her started on something else. And it seems to be working good so far, so hey, why not keep up with it? But I asked her to do a good research paper for me on homeopathy because I also condemn homeopathy. And, of course, in many areas of the world, people call me a homeopath because I'm an herbalist. And I would like to draw for you the great distinction between homeopathy and herbology and natural healing. I consider homeopathy the closest alternative medicine to modern medicine, and for a couple reasons that I'll point out. The first thing is that Mr. Hahnemann, the inventor of homeopathy, was a medical doctor. Okay, now I believe that once a person goes through medical school that they're so absolutely brainwashed and destroyed and their mind is so ruined that there's very little chance of them ever becoming normal human beings again. Okay, and I've seen this. And this is why it always amazes me that most people in our field or in natural healing books still look at a medical doctor and go, wow, if he's got an MD after his name, this article must be important. If there's an MD after his name, I usually don't read the article. I know that this person's mind has been so altered by going to school that long and hearing that much garbage that there's most likely that there won't be anything of interest for me there. But anyways, he was a medical doctor. He was born in 1755 in Germany. He was dissatisfied himself with the medical profession, and he started developing his own system of medicine, which was using the tools of medicine in that day, but just in a different dosage. He used everything the medical doctors used. He just changed the dosage of it and used a very small or energetic or invisible dosage. He felt that, here are some quotes out of some of his original works, that nature provides few agents that can be employed for any effective cure. Okay, so he's not a natural healer because he doesn't believe that nature can heal us. He said nature can cure disease, but it's only by chance. And that natural medicine cannot be regulated and controlled. Now, I always thought this was wonderful. We hear this from the medical profession nowadays. Well, we make pharmaceutical drugs because, this is my voice for the FDA and pharmaceutical industry. We make pharmaceutical drugs because they are standardized. And in nature, we have all these plants, and there's dirt on them and bacteria on them, and that these plants have different chemicals depending on the time of the year. Not only can we not take the valerian from the backyard here to my valerian in California, it'll be different. It'll have different chemicals. It'll have higher amounts of some chemicals and lower amounts of other. And depending on the time of the year and how much rain we got, and if it's been hot outside, those chemicals even change. And I think, wonderful. What did Dr. Christopher always say? Use what's in your own backyard. So I have to assume that the valerian in the backyard here is designed for the person who lives in this house. And the valerian in Southern California is designed for those of us who live in Southern California. He always said, live under your own fig tree. And that really makes a lot of sense. And we're going to talk about that a little later. So, this man's not a natural healer, and he also was into what I term as voodoo. Okay, he used to strangle and suffocate birds in his medicine because he thought that the spirit of the bird, when it died, would leave and go into his medication. Okay, so if any of you are thinking or using homeopathy and thinking that this man was, you know, what he was, I want to tell you who this guy really was. And you can read this in any of his basic books. Yes?
Sorry, could we get his name one more time?
Yeah, it was his first name, Samuel Hahnemann. And I'll spell that for you here. It's a tongue twister. H-A-H-N-E-M-A-N-N, the father of homeopathy. His full name was Dr. Samuel Christian Frederick Hahnemann. But let's get beyond all that, because we can always argue that. People did a lot of things different in 1755. They threw their poop out the windows into the street. You know, okay. But let's look at what are these homeopathic preparations or medicines comprised of. The reason that many people, if you say I'm an herbalist, they will call you a homeopath, or in many areas of the world, homeopath and herbalist are considered the same, is because over half the homeopathic preparations are made from plants. They're botanical preparations. And that's great. Although I do feel that they're incredibly poor quality, but that's great. And they are an energetic, invisible dose. In other words, homeopathy doses are diluted to where they're almost invisible. It's considered energetic medicine. We're using the energy of something, not actually the whole substance. But my question was, well, what are the other almost half of homeopathic preparations that are non-herbal? And most people at that point go, and to date, I have read hundreds of articles on homeopathy, and I have never seen mentioned the things that I'm going to read you on a list right here of what the other things are in homeopathic preparations. So bear with me. I got about 50 of them here, and I want to disgust you and gross you out to where you would never consider using homeopathic medicine again this life. Quicksilver. Now that's one that David's telling me is becoming popular again, but they're using that. Secretion of the whale, so if you're into animals' rights, forget homeopathy. Anthrax poison. I thought that was nice. Anthracite coal dissolved in boiling caustic soda and potash. That's an interesting one. Coal tar derivatives, many of them. So what does that sound like? Allopathic medicine. Crushed honeybees. The papal cross spider, arsenic, a maceration of a typical tuberculoid lung, interesting, cockroaches, or if you want something more exotic, Indian cockroaches. They have both of those, so if you want something a little more Far East, you can go with the Indian cockroach. Toxin of botulism, poison of the bufo toad, animal charcoal, a nosode of carcinoma. Do we all know what carcinoma is? Cancer, the rudimentary thumbnail of a horse, the beaver, copperhead snake, we know one of the most poisonous snakes, lice, chloroform, bed bugs, the lining of the gallbladder and larger ducts, rattlesnakes, diphtheria virus, Colorado potato bug, coral snake, 35% solution of formaldehyde gas, crushed live ants, a meconium deposit of the amniotic fluid taken from the colt. Digestive fluid of live lobsters. There's an exotic one. That's probably a bit expensive, because lobsters I know are. No one's laughing. Come on, we can't lose our sense of humor this early in the morning. Pancreas, cyanide, potassium nitrate, saltpeter, dog's milk, grease in horses. I hate to think of what that might be. Skunks, musk, fish, black Cuban spider, virus of the cobra, animal oil, liver oil, woodlouse, ovarian extract, membrane of eggshells, something taken from the stringy mucus containing from the virus of whooping cough. That must be an expensive one. Lead, distilled herring brine, scabies, the common flea, septic pus, inky juice of cuttlefish, eel serum, a protein decomposition of human feces, roasted sponge, Cuban spiders, Spanish spiders, orange spiders, and dried thyroid gland of sheep, TNT, which is not to be confused with my intestinal corrective formula. The nuclear protein nosode from a tubercular abscess, lymph from the smallpox pustule, German viper, vials containing alcohol exposed to X-rays, and the Gila monster.
Shark cartilage in there.
Oh yeah, sure. Let's throw a little of that in. Unusual or rare, now these aren't used by a lot of homeopaths now, but I thought I'd throw these in. Cancer, caterpillars, cat's milk, centipedes, roasted eggshells, gallstones, green lizard, gray spider, gunpowder, head louse, king crab blood, moccasin snake, leech, black spider, puff adder, testicular extract, and wolf's lung. Anyway, what I've been professing for years, and what people are passing off as some new age clean stuff, is really disgusting. Now people argue with me on that, and they say, well, but it's just the energy of it. Okay, it is not the real stuff. In fact, if you test it, you won't find that cancer nosode or those crushed live ants. It'll test as nothing because it's the energy of it. But even to get well, why would we want the energy of that stuff? Think about that. Who really wants the energy of someone's macerated tubercular lung or human feces? Okay, if that's what it takes to get well, I'd rather be sick. Think about it. I want avocados. I want lemons and limes and apples and barley and carrot juice. So my job, part of my job at the school, is to really blast away at any other form of healing that's alternative healing but is not natural healing. And so that's really what we're making the distinction of this morning here. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but I've done a lot of research here, and I was horrified because I used to take homeopathic preparations. I have many clients that come in that are taking homeopathic preparations, and they're never told what's in them, because you won't find those names I just said on the preparation. There'll be some long, lengthy name that you can't understand. I mean, birth control pills are made from horse urine. How many people know that? You don't get your birth control pill and turn the little wheel and push one out and it says horse urine, big thing, horse urine. They don't want you to know that, okay? But it's the pregnant mare urine is used to make birth control pills. Now, I'm not making judgments on that either, but I'm just saying that consumers are not told what is in the stuff. And this just isn't in the grocery store. It's in most of the medicines that are made. Now, another form of medicine that's very popular now is Chinese herbology. I prefer to cross out the name of herbology and really call it Chinese animal, mineral, vegetable, vegetable, rock. Let's add rock in there. They use a lot of rocks. Traditional, voodoo. Okay. Now again, I know a lot of people might think, wow, this guy's condemning everything. But let me talk a little bit about Chinese medicine. First of all, Chinese medicine is thousands and thousands of years old, okay? I'm a big believer in certain forms of medicine to drop them if they're old. And let's move further into this new age of healing, enlightenment, love, laughter, whatever it is we're involved in here. And Chinese medicine really is not a part of that. It's something that we really need to drop. It's thousands of years old. And I think that we should absolutely boycott it, and I think it's disgusting. And I'll tell you why I have those feelings. First of all, Chinese medicine is loaded with animals. If you have any doubts about that, walk into any Chinese herb shop, and when you get done throwing up, take a look at what you see around in barrels. And you will see horns of animals, dried animal testicles, a lot of fish, all sorts of animal parts. It's scary. It smells horrible, and you can just smell the bacteria in the air. Okay? The Chinese are responsible for most of the extinction of animals on this planet. Okay? The tiger in the wild is almost totally extinct because tiger bone is the number one of the main essences used in Chinese medicinal products. To the extent where tigers are almost extinct on this planet, and to the extent where most international airports in the world now have set up an exhibit telling people not to buy Chinese medicine. And if you want to see a great one, you can go to LAX, Los Angeles International Airport, Terminal 4, the Bradley. It'll be now a different name because we have a new mayor, terminal, but our international terminal. They have a whole wall that says, do not buy Chinese medicine. Don't bring it into the United States. And if you see it, if they see it, they'll throw it away on you. Now, it's still sold here, and they show pictures of tigers lying dead all over the ground. They show pictures of rhinoceroses and elephants, and they show the preparations with those being ingredients in them. And the Chinese, again, are not harvesting these things in a natural way. Most of the rhinoceros are killed by Apache helicopter gunships in Kenya, and this material is poached. Recently, I got this article about the rhinoceros, how it's almost extinct in Africa. And the article out of the newspaper says, black rhinos killed for their stumps. And let me read this to you. Poachers in Zimbabwe are killing dehorned black rhinos for their stumps, and the government said yesterday it's run out of funds to try and stop them. Glenn Tatum, a game warden, said to the Herald newspaper that poachers had increased the slaughter despite the government's campaign to remove the rhinos' horns. He said that 8 dehorned rhinos had been killed and their stumps carved out in the past 6 months. The African government, to try to get the stop of Chinese medicine poachers, has cut the horns off all the rhinoceroses so they wouldn't be killed for their horns, and the Chinese are still killing them just to dig out the little stump that's in there. It says that an official of the Department of National Parks and Wildlife Management, where Mr. Tatum is chief warden, said, "We have no money for the anti-poaching program, and we need several thousands of dollars to get it going again because rhino horns are used as an aphrodisiac in Far East medicine." And this is not the only animal that's used. Many animals are slaughtered. So if you're thinking of becoming a vegetarian, let's not fool ourselves by taking either, whether it's these other products with bile and liver and fish oils, to most Chinese preparations. Now, this book here comes out of one of the top stores in Los Angeles for Chinese herbs. This is very hip place to go, Chinese herbal tonics. I'll put my finger over the name. Who needs another lawsuit? I got 1,000 going. Are we all okay? Hanging in here? Hope I'm not depressing everybody too much this early in the morning. Okay. Okay. Chinese herbal tonics. Wonderful. Chinese herbal tonic. Who wouldn't want herbs? I'll take herbs from all over the world. But is it really herbal tonics? No, this should be called Chinese animal, mineral, vegetable, rock, traditional voodoo. That's my name. In fact, we'll cross that out and write that down there. Why do I say that? Because really, let's look what's in here. Now, many of my clients who are absolute vegans go to this place and get elixirs and drink them until I enlighten them about what's in this. But this is a lie. Okay, Chinese medicine is not herbal. It's partly herbal. Homeopathic is partly herbal. But what's the other part? This is the question. And as I look through this book on Chinese herbal tonics, this one here, and you're all welcome to look at it, I found gecko, which is that little lizard that crawls all over Southern California and most warm, temperate areas of the world that you see in a rock. When you get near it, goes, whoo, and it's gone, gecko. Sometimes if a cat grabs them, they let their tail go, and the tail still goes like this, and the cat's playing with it because it missed that the lizard's over there. That's gecko. I found cordyceps, which is the fungus off head of caterpillars. I found deer antler. They assured me, though, that the deers were kept on a farm and that their antlers were just snipped and the deers weren't hurt. Yeah, that's what I say, too. Oh, yeah, I've heard that story before. Dragon bone, and I thought, well, that's odd. I thought dragons were mythical creatures. And I looked that up, and it's mastodon and rhinoceros fossils. That's what that is. Placenta. And no one's been able to tell me where the placenta comes from. Okay, human placenta, animal placenta, what kind of placenta? When I ask those questions, when you ask those questions even of people in alternative medicine, they're like medical doctors. They go, well, it's clean, it's the right stuff. You know, I never get a true answer. Tortoise shell, last I knew, these were endangered species. And I've just been down to Costa Rica last year, and they're protected species on this planet. Pearls, fish, gypsum. I like that. Does anybody know what gypsum is? It's this right here. So if we want some Chinese medicine, let's get a hammer, hack open the wall, and make some tea. That's a big preparation. And when I go to Chinatown and I see the herbalists making piles of tea, I see, oh yeah, some of this good herb, some of this, oh, praying mantis. And you're like, whoa! You know, and there's these dried up bugs in it too. And it's like, I have those in my pharmacy, and we just found a whole bunch of them. But when we find them, we compost them. We don't put them in the tea. If you're an herbalist, you get used to bugs, but they don't clean them out of the herbs. They go right in. Okay, now that's a joke. What I mean is that they use insects as part of their preparation. And last but not least, I was doing a research project on some herbs, and I was researching hawthorn berry. And I paid a person to do some research for me, and they sent this incredible article on hawthorn, from China and some new Chinese research on hawthorn berry. And I'm going to read a little bit of this article to you. It's really, really interesting as far as the power of hawthorn. And it says 16 species of hawthorn plant were used. So they used numerous species, not just Crataegus oxycantha. Hawthorn is made up of more than 30 different chemical components, and it's demonstrated to be antiarrhythmic, so it means it gets your heart beating correctly, lowers your blood pressure. It's wonderful. It said that almost all studies have been done on the fruit of hawthorn, so they wanted to try just the leaf only and see if it was effective, and they found that the leaf was just as effective as the fruit. And the animals used in this experiment were dogs of either sex. 21 healthy adult dogs were anesthetized intravenously with sodium pentobarbital, and a tracheal tube was connected to a respirator for artificial ventilation and was put in place. The chest was open to expose the heart, which was suspended in a pericardial cradle. They took the cardiac arteries, the arteries feeding blood to the heart. They snipped them in half. They put a pump inside them and a valve, and then they slowly shut down the blood to the heart of the dog that was alive to give it heart attacks, to give it at least 2 massive heart attacks by stopping the blood flow through the coronary arteries. Once the dog had suffered 2 severe heart attacks, they gave it hawthorn before, after, and during, and found that hawthorn stopped damage to the heart by over 50%. This is great. Problem is I already knew that. Okay, Dr. Christopher told me that. And then they cut the hearts out completely, dissected them, and threw the dogs and the hearts away. I don't know any herbalist friends that do this. And this is part of Chinese traditional medicine. This is just like modern medicine in our country. And so the reason I'm picking on this is what I want to train you to do is be a fanatic when it comes to investigation, when digging deep in everything, even me. If all of you walk out of here and become little androids of me, I will sincerely worry about you. You need to become your own detectives and look at everything that you're putting in your mouth and putting on your body. I'm not perfect. I'm evolving. Okay, I will make no claims at being perfect in here. Every week I change my mind and develop new things. But I'm always evolving towards doing a little bit better, making myself a little healthier. So anyway, enough said about Chinese medicine. My feeling is that we should boycott it in general. And I also do not believe in acupuncture. I believe that that would still run under the category of not breaking the hermetic seal of the body that Dr. Christopher talks about. And he was mainly talking about injections of fluid intramuscularly or intravenously, but I've had many acupuncture treatments. I used to do acupuncture. I decided that it didn't feel natural to me. And I have this filter in my mind I call a natural healing filter, and as I get older, not much gets through it anymore. I become simpler and simpler and pure and pure. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. So really the next step now that we've talked about many other forms of alternative healing and why they may not be natural, well, how do we decide if something is natural? So I'd really like to go into now what is natural healing. Yes?
How about discussing Ayurvedic for a second?
That's a good point because that's very popular right now. Now, Ayurveda is the traditional system of healing, mainly herbal healing for India, which is their traditional system of medicine. It's very old, maybe the absolute oldest, and most of it is herbal. I guess the biggest problem I have with Ayurveda is that it's really designed more for the people of India, the culture of India, the religions of India, the temperature, the geography and environment of India. And so I find that that doesn't really apply, especially here in Utah, because after traveling to India multiple times, I realized this is very different. And so I find that when we adopt systems of healing that are far away from our geographical location, many times what they suggest to do food-wise or herb-wise for health will have the opposite reaction in here or where we live. And but there's a big move nowadays because there's a lot to offer in the world. You know, we can learn things, martial arts. This is not a traditional American Indian outfit. This is a traditional Japanese or Okinawan outfit. So we have a lot that can be learned and liked, but at the same time we have to keep our focus on where it is we live and our environment around us. This is why when we talk about food, I don't like the macrobiotic food program. Many people have been healed of cancer from it, but it's really designed for a different climate than what we live in. So I think that's the biggest problem. And as systems of healing get older, I have seen some Ayurvedic physicians diagnose what herbs to give you by having you urinate in a bowl, and then they sprinkle the herbs in the bowl and see how they rise and settle. And that's a method of diagnosis. That doesn't make sense to me. So it's, again, a very old, very traditional method, and I think that there are aspects of all these. Certainly Chinese medicine, they know more about certain species of herbs than we do, and we can utilize that information. But sometimes when a system gets so out of whack, I believe we're better off just burying it and going on. But Ayurveda, I probably could pick on least. But again, you know, in the United States, we pay $200 a pair for Lois jeans from France, and Levi's are $25. When I go over to Galeries Lafayette in Paris, or Les Halles, or any of the shopping areas, Levi's are $200 and Lois jeans are $25. What does that mean? It means that we always think that something from far away is better. And we think that with herbs. We think that if it's far away, it's better. Which means that when this planet was created, it should really go through space like this, because all the good herbs are on one side of it. Of course, anything that grows in America is not powerful or effective. All the good herbs are in China and India. And this is almost what we would be led to believe by these people, that this stuff out in our backyard, well, it would work, but we'd be much better off getting something more exotic. And Americans especially are like that. But even in one of the most recent articles here at the end, in this Chinese one, it said, but now they were trying to investigate some of the plants that grow into America because they've heard that a couple of our species are more effective. This is just the opposite, yes?
Most of our Native American ginseng goes over to China.
Absolutely. They're not fools. All our ginseng, 90% of the harvested echinacea is exported to other areas of the world. Absolutely. And the Chinese are always telling me that wild American ginseng is not as powerful or as revered or revered as the Chinese wild ginseng. But when I go down to Chinatown and I'm looking at the ginseng, I go, well, what about American? You don't have any American. And they'll say, well, Chinese, I mean, hey, my experience with Chinese, and I can say this as a martial artist, Japanese, Chinese, Koreans, we tend to think of them as all these enlightened beings, but they're the biggest bigots I've ever met on this planet. I mean, they've been killing each other since time began, and they all hate each other. The Chinese hate the Koreans hate the Chinese and the Koreans both hate the Japanese, and the Japanese hate the Koreans and the Chinese. And most of them that I have met, especially in Chinatown, don't like white people either. Now, this is not a bigoted remark. This is what I experienced, because my sensei and many of my martial arts teachers were Oriental. But at the same time, when I go into the pharmacies in Chinatown, they don't want to talk to me. But when I say to them, tell me about the ginseng and why don't you have wild American, they say that the Chinese is better. And I say, gosh, I have a whole bunch of wild American. They go, can you get me some? Okay? I always notice that. So it's just a line. It's not reality. The American wild ginseng is some of the most powerful stuff I've ever taken. So a lot of this is cultural and social and bigotry, and we think, hey, it's better if it's more exotic. And, you know, when I go on a vacation, I'll go to Greece. And everybody in England goes, well, why don't you go to Mexico? That's supposed to be nicer. It's too close. You know what I'm saying? It's not exotic enough. We think of Mexico as just a place to get maids and gardeners. okay, in Southern California. Now again, these are not bigoted remarks. I love all people, and I'm definitely not a bigot, and Martin Luther King was one of my greatest idols and heroes. I'm just talking about my life experience and reality and the way people think. Okay, so what is natural healing? I think if we could pick a word that has been bastardized more than any other word in the human language, it would probably be the word natural. It's used as a buzzword to sell almost any product in a health food store. And really it can be taken in a lot of different ways, probably the same way organic and inorganic can. We see that Dr. Schulze's idea is different than that of an organic chemist, which is different than that of an organic farmer. So let's clarify a little bit what I think and how I like to look at as natural. I think a great definition would be as nature created. You know, keeping it very simple, as the way natural is natural. Those plants out there in the ground are natural. Something that really hasn't been touched or altered or changed much by man. So that would mean that herbs, if we went out and ate them, are natural. An herb tea, we're playing with it now. Herb capsules, getting farther away. Herb tinctures, we better draw a line there. Now we're talking about potent drugs. I think herb tinctures are potent drugs. I use them, okay, but that's man's intervention into this natural world, and that's why the further we play with nature, the more our yellow alert, orange alert, blue alert, red alert should go on. And when we're using tinctures, this is how people hurt themselves, because they think that an herbal tincture, well, that's real natural. No, that's not natural. Alcohol doesn't occur in nature over 15%, and we're using 50% vodka. These herbs have been changed. We have isolated principles out of them. So natural is really in its original state. And I'm not saying we won't play, because in a few days we're going to be making tinctures and ointments and things in here and looking at them and tasting them. And, but we have to keep that in mind as nature intended. One of my favorite handouts, no, my absolute favorite handout that I've ever designed is the first page in this booklet, which is really, what is the difference between natural healing and medical intervention? Every class I teach, this is the first handout I give out. Every patient I get, they get this on their first visit. Everywhere I speak, I hand these out, and sometimes I've even been found, you know, standing outside of public events handing these out on the sidewalk. I feel that since it's the first one in here, you might put some importance on this particular handout. I spent a lot of time really trying to isolate the difference between natural healing and medical intervention. So let's take a look at this. You notice that I call it medical intervention, because the difference is that in natural healing, we kind of assist the body in doing its own thing. That would be a hip way of saying it. Medical intervention is figuring that the body cannot heal itself on its own, so we better step in and do some things, probably radical, to help the body since it's not able to help itself. In natural healing, we create a better lifestyle or environment to help the body to help itself. So first of all, I have here symptoms. What we look at as symptoms in natural healing is communication. The body's talking to us. It's giving us a message. I have here, we listen when our body talks and use this communication to guide us in our healing process. So we don't look at these things as diseases. We look at these things as communication. This is wonderful. Our body's speaking. Let's listen. So I have here, stop, look, and listen. I think this is one of the first things that we should do. We have a headache? Sit down. Close your mouth. Breathe. Let's figure out what's going on. Medical intervention is to dull, suppress, or completely remove the symptom, most often assessing that the symptom is the disease and never getting to the cause of why our body is even communicating in the first place. It's a different way of working. The focus of natural healing is to create a healthy person. And of course, the focus of medical intervention is destroy, kill, or cure a disease. When someone walks in my office, I see a human being. A medical doctor sees a spleen, sees an arterial system, a liver, a kidney. Method of treatment. We set up a proper living environment so that our body can heal itself, and this is done through many of the things I mentioned. Assistance. When we look at medical intervention, it's attacking, killing, or removing disease using drugs, surgery, altering or removing malfunctioning organs, whatever. That's intervention. Therapeutic products, wholesome. You've probably heard David talk about wholesome. It's one of his favorite words. And with natural healing, we use whole products. And we'll talk a little bit later about different products on the market and how to decide whether they're whole or not. But of course, medical intervention uses man-made products, many toxic products. Ours don't have any side effects. No one ever got iron poisoning from eating too many beet greens. But on the other hand, people have died from taking too much ferrous oxide or ferrous gluconate. So we don't have side effects. Therapeutic modalities, we have tons of them, but they're all body work, movement, exercise, aerobics, psychotherapy, good emotional habits, good food, juices. And of course, we all know what the medical intervention, thank you, uses. Emotions. My clients are usually very excited, positive attitude. I instill in them strength. I like to help people develop strength. I like to empower my patients to take control of their life. A doctor doesn't want to empower you as a patient, does he? You're just a victim. You're just a person that's virtually ignorant, stupid, hasn't had the same education. They know how to fix you, you don't. And of course, I have here, most of the people I know that go to a doctor have the negative attitude of coping, anxiety, fear, weakness, depression, being out of control, and our life is in someone else's hands. And how that manifests here under responsibility is, doctor, please heal me. I'm an unlucky victim. I caught this disease, and will you please heal me and save me because I'm stupid and I can't do that myself. But in natural healing, we let people know that, yes, they have the power to heal themselves. This is why, instead of Dr. Richard Schulze, I like my friends and students to call me Professor Cayenne, which is a name I've gone by for years, helped by Dr. Christopher, my herbal name, my secret herbal identification code. Because I used to be a little bit obsessed with cayenne when I was in process of healing my heart. And I remember that my beard used to be much longer, and there was lots of cayenne in my beard and my mustache, and people would just get near me and sneeze. So that's how I got the name. But anyways, our responsibility, we have created our current level of health, and therefore we can change it and heal ourselves. We are in control. So the big difference is we're in control, and with medical intervention we're not. And I'd like to flip to the other side of this, which is what determines our current health level, and that is basically everything that we do in our life. And this is how I work with people. In my mind, using this chart, all these areas to work with people, and of course that equals their level of health. Now, it used to be thought that it took 7 years for your body to totally regenerate. And medical profession has always said, no, that's not true. And now they're saying very loudly, no, that's not true. In fact, at Harvard University, they're saying it only takes 2 years for your entire body to regenerate now. So they used to say, no, it wasn't true, because they say that the body never regenerated, that brain cells don't grow back, and all of this. And now they're saying that it absolutely does regenerate every last atomic particle, and it'll do it in 2 years or less. And at the bottom of this, you'll see that I have your entire body totally rebuilds itself in less than 2 years, 98% of it in less than 1 year. You can grow a new brain atom for atom in 1 year. Your bloodstream every 4 months has changed, just like an oil change in your car. Every red blood cell dies in 120 days almost exactly. So 120 days from now, you should have a whole different blood in your system. What's that going to be dependent upon? Yeah, what you put in, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, that's going to be what your blood you get. Your skeleton in 3 months, your DNA in 2 months, your liver in 6 weeks, your skin in 1 month, and your stomach lining in 5 days. And that's why when someone comes to me with an ulcer, if they don't have it gone in 5 days, I haven't done my job. And everybody that's come to me with an ulcer, if they've listened to me, their stomach's better in 3 days. So I think they're wrong. It's quicker. And we'll talk about ulcers in a minute. Absolutely. Opposite's always true. Probably quicker than that, but sure. And so anyway, that's one of my favorite handouts that I just wanted to point out. And if you're having some thoughts about natural healing or modalities or responsibilities or whatever, it's nice to look back at this. I share this with my clients so they can see that by making changes in various areas of their life, they can heal themselves. That's a very important part of natural healing. You know, intervention is a big part of medicine, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that. It's a real perfect example of egomania, when we think we know so much that we can actually cut into the body and start playing around with its anatomy and physiology. I mean, really think of the ego that you'd have to be able to think that you've figured it all out. Think about that. That you have figured it all out, so now we can go in and change. And the one thing that I know about medicine is it is absolutely wrong. Now, how do I know this? Because I study at UCLA, medical school, medical library, and the hospital there. And I notice that about every 6 months, all the textbooks are thrown out and new ones come in because the old ones are wrong. Okay? New ideas, new thoughts, new discoveries. So medicine is really always in a state of being wrong. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, except going in with a knife or a potentially lethal drug, if you really don't know what you're doing, would be dangerous. So I suggest that we should never do that, because we'll never really know all the functions of the body. They used to say, well, the liver has one main function. Now they say it has 150 main functions. The liver's functions are infinite, and we'll never know them all. We'll absolutely never, ever know how intricate and amazing this human body is. We'll never know it. We'll never really understand the importance of the mind in the body, or the spirit and the mind in the body. There's no machines we'll develop to test that, so we should just give it up. And if we really needed electron microscopes, I feel they'd be provided to us and grow off of rose trees. So, you know, most of the tools are not needed. I used to have a lot of tools in my office, too, until I really understood what Dr. Christopher was talking about. Now I like it when the lights go out. Okay, how do they intervene? I think that one of the best examples would be polio, the polio epidemic. And you've probably heard about this, and I'll talk about it a little more. You know, early on in the 1900s, when tonsils became inflamed, doctors decided to cut them out, figuring that they were a bad area of the body. So doctors snipped the tonsils out, and that seemed to end the problem. You know, if your hand hurts and you cut it off, that will really end the problem. You won't have an aching hand anymore. So this is the way doctors dealt with things. But in the 1940s and 50s, we had a polio outbreak in this country, and thousands and thousands and millions of people were vaccinated for polio. I was one. In fact, I remember in school they made it cherry flavored for kids. I got back in line 3 times to get it. So I'm glad I'm taking care of myself now. Everybody that I knew has had the polio vaccine. Since then, the polio vaccine has been withdrawn from use. It's been recalled. When Dr. Salk first invented it, they made the polio vaccine. It was a live virus. It was made from the infected pus from pigs' kidneys. And they checked it, and there was a lot of bacteria in there, and they got all the bacteria and viral activity out and cleaned it up, and it was perfect. 15 years later, they looked at it again and found 150 live viruses in the polio vaccine because we have better microscopes now. See the problem with that? We can never intervene like that. So they immediately took it off the market, but one of the viruses is called the SV40 virus, and Harvard has found that inside every cancer cell, and the incidence of cancer is up 10 times since the polio vaccine. So look at this nightmare. Okay? It first started maybe with tonsillectomies. The tonsils now have been discovered to be a very important immune organ. And I have a handout for you in here. We'll move to that if I can find it. It is general immunology, about halfway through. If we could find that page. And I have an article here that you can read, but I'm just going to go over it in case you wanted to see it. This is one of the latest textbooks used for medical students to teach them immunology, about the immune system. And I'm going to read a couple paragraphs from here that you'll be able to find later. One stating that in the location where the tonsils are, they provide an ever-present source of lymphocytes, or white blood cells, capable of reacting against microbes that constantly bombard our oral cavity. In this location, this is the last paragraph on page 268, it says, in this location, the tonsillar lymphocytes synthesize immunoglobulin against the poliovirus. Okay, so it's the only area of the body that's really been discovered to synthesize an antibody or a chemical that will destroy the poliovirus. So if you have your tonsils cut out, your body can no longer help you against the poliovirus. So was the polio epidemic really an epidemic, or was it brought on by the massive tonsillectomies that were done in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s? I believe that the entire polio epidemic was just a side effect to this medical egomania of cutting parts out of our body. And that's proven now by modern immunology. If you go on to the next page, page 269, you'll see an area that I have outlined a little bit, but just above that it says, these characteristics underscore the importance of the tonsils in the maintenance of immunity and provide evidence that argues against performing tonsillectomy. I don't know if any of you can see that, the paragraph just above the one that I enlightened there. For example, there are reports of increased incidence of paralytic poliomyelitis following tonsil adenoidectomy, suggesting that removal of the tonsils in young children will impair the anti-polio immune mechanism that's present in the respiratory tract, or may be present. It's also been suggested that the incidence of Hodgkin's disease is higher among tonsillectized individuals. Now, what this means, and I like to go back to that one statement, these characteristics underscore the importance of the tonsils in the maintenance of immunity and provide evidence that argues against performing tonsillectomy. When you go to medical school nowadays and you go to immunology class, they will tell you do not remove the tonsils. They are an immune aggregation. They are an important part of your body's immunity. When the bell rings, you go over to surgery and they tell you to take out the tonsils. So medical doctors are very confused nowadays. One thing that I can tell you is that this year 1 million children in the United States will have their tonsils removed. It's still the #1 pediatric surgery in this country. Yeah, most of my clients have had their tonsils removed. It's almost half of all pediatric surgeries total is tonsils removed. Now, a doctor leaves medical school about $100,000 in debt, opens up a practice. Mrs. Jones comes in with her daughter, and you can tell her to gargle with a little golden seal, even take an antibiotic, and that's good for $50. You can make $3,000 to $5,000 doing a tonsillectomy. So what are you going to do? You got a $100,000 note with a bank. They're knocking at the door. You got house payments, car payments, boat payments. Better off living a life that doesn't require so much money to keep it running, and then you won't be tempted to snip people's body parts out or dilute herbal products. Any thoughts on that? Are we all okay?
Can you talk relate to the adenoids? Yeah.
Well, the adenoids are just another tonsil. We have 3 pairs of tonsils. Luckily, the Creator has figured out a way to hide one pair way down in our throat so they can't be cut out. But we have the tonsils, the adenoids, and a 3rd pair way down here. These 2 are usually removed, tonsils and adenoids, but they're both lymphatic aggregations. They both do the same thing. There are other lymphatic aggregations in the body. Another very important one is the appendix. And also in the immune books, they tell you not to remove the appendix, because now it's discovered to be the same as the tonsils. And in people whose appendix is removed, they're noticing their spleen doesn't work as well, and all types of immunity is depressed. So when I get clients that have a family history of cancer, and they've had their appendix removed and their tonsils removed, and they've had Epstein-Barr virus or mononucleosis as a teenager, I'm worried. And we start working on the immune system. And towards the end of the 3 days that I'm teaching, I'm going to talk more about working with people. And I have lots of patient files and case histories and stories to share with you and talk to you about. And we can discuss all our own health problems if any of us get bold enough to say, I have hemorrhoids, or whatever we might do in here. I even brought my enema kit and rectal syringe in case we have any volunteers. Cold sheet treatment's not out of the question. I've done a dozen of them up here. So we'll see how far we want to play with this. But so again, this is part of the egomania of medicine, is intervening and removing organs. So what are the principles of natural healing? I look at it as three basic ones. And my favorite principle is what Dr. Christopher always said, KISS, keep it simple, student. And I have to recite that mantra hourly. That's my natural healing filter. If anything gets too complicated, I don't want it. I don't want it, I don't want to use it, I don't want to put it in my body, I don't want to tell anybody else to put it in their body, I don't want to do it, I don't want to move it, I don't want to think it. And I have a standard rule at my place, if it plugs in the wall, we don't use it. I don't have anything in my office besides a light bulb that plugs in the wall that I use to work with people. And I've gotten rid of all my machinery too. I did that many years ago. In fact, I went on such a cleanse. I had 17 diplomas on my wall from all different schools I had studied, and I ripped them all up and threw them away. In fact, I threw out 3,000 books. I emptied my office to where there was just a candle in the middle of the room. And my patients got a little squeamish at that point. I think they knew I was going through some type of great emotional elimination. And, but I had to do that. That was a real healing for me, is to realize that I'm not these pieces of paper on the wall. I'm not this machinery. I'm not these books. I'm right here. If you have something you want to ask me, I'm right here. And really all I'm selling is myself, is what I've learned, what I've experienced, what is my reality. Simplicity. I have discovered that simplest programs get the most dramatic results. And so it's important that we remember that. Some of you will go on to make Christopher Hobbs look dumb, maybe. Okay? Some of you will go on to be greater natural healers than me. Some of you will go on to know the Latin names and usage and the names of the chemicals in the usage of 10,000 herbs. And some of you will go on to mainly know the 5 herbs that grow in your backyard and know them really well. Okay, we're all going to do different things in here. And this is wonderful. We need all kinds. And this is why I have the greatest respect. David is not only my best friend, but I have the utmost respect for him because he brings different people in this school. Okay, and you're really starting to see that now. And we all need each other. I'm friends with Christopher and David, and we don't see everything eye to eye, as you can hear from my craziness. Christopher calls me a warrior, but we love each other, and we see each other and work with each other all over this planet, and we do things differently. But our essence of natural healing is the same. And all of you will do things differently, and so I want you all to know that you'll find some things hard in this course and some things more difficult and some things easy, and go with where your energy takes you, where you feel the drive. I studied applied kinesiology for 2 years. I threw it away. It's a great art. I can't do it. It doesn't work for me. I don't mean it's invalid, and I know people that do it really well. It doesn't work for me. But herbs, it was like magic. You know, plants, I love plants. I eat them, I taste them, I look at them. I'm going to have you sick by the end of today. We're going to eat so many herbs in here. No. We're going to taste some. I brought 50 tinctures here to taste, a lot of herbs. We're going to start that real quick here. Herbs really, I moved with herbs. When I was in school, when I was young, no pun intended. I know what you're thinking. When I was young in school, I took Latin. It was on the decimal system, and at the end of the first quarter, I got a 10. That wasn't very good, right? Okay, 10%. That means 1 out of 10 questions I got right, 9 out of 10 wrong. So when I came to this school and I realized I had to learn Latin, I went into a panic. I'm so glad I did. It's helped me tremendously. And even though I don't say calophyllum thalassoides too much at the supermarket or the organic grocery, it's an incredible help in my study of plants and herbology. But I just want to give you all permission to feel comfortable where you're at and what you're going to do. Samuel Thompson was one of the greatest herbalists in this country, and I don't think he had any education. And it's estimated that he healed over 3 million people using herbs. In fact, his system of herbology, considered the Thomsonian system or the Cayenne Lobelia system, is the same system of healing that Brigham Young used, and it's the same system of healing that Dr. Christopher used. And this all comes down from a man who was, most people thought, was intellectually stupid. Okay? But he knew how to get people well. It seems as though he knew how to do that better than anybody who lived during his time in the Northeast United States, because people came to see him from all over the world. So I just want you all to know that whatever level you're at, you're going to be able to help people, even if it's knowing 5 or 6 herbs well that grow in your backyard. In fact, most herbalists that I know that know 5 or 6 herbs well that grow in their backyard usually tend to be more effective than people that know 1,000 herbs but not very well. And I'm just, after years into this, just starting to feel like I understand a few of these plants. Yes?
Well, as a neophyte into the herbal healing world, at times I feel somewhat insecure in recommending someone do this or someone do that. And I'd like to know your own philosophy on how would you take a child such as a lot of us are here, and step us into the
Sure.
world?
Well,
How do you go forward?
I think one of the first things, that's a great question, is on this thing, no side effects. Okay, so if you were a medical student, I'd be scared to death, because you make the wrong move, you mix the wrong stuff, you kill people. Okay, but the greatest thing is that the worst side effect you could ever create in someone probably would be that you'd make them throw up or have too many bowel movements. Okay, so the first thing is it's safe. And that's one thing that really made me feel comfortable, is I'm going to make mistakes. And when I do, usually just nothing happens. Okay, when I make a mistake. And then I get a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance. So that's one thing that made me feel more comfortable. The other thing is feel free to just jump right in. And that's why one of the reasons I brought all these herbs, we're going to taste a lot of them, eat them, sample them. We're working with a system of healing that's so natural, it can be very effective, but we don't hurt anybody. And I think that's one of the things that kept me feeling safe about it. And one thing I realized too is that people treat themselves incredibly harshly. And I have people that smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day, drink a 5th of whiskey, never have a positive thought, and have a bowel movement once a month. And it's like, are you sure this 1 cup of peppermint tea isn't going to give me diarrhea? And I have people that usually, you'll find that people that live this incredible life that beat themselves up on an hourly level, well, the first thing they'll pick that upset them is probably the best thing they've ever done for themselves in their life. You'll find that out as a practitioner. So I just want to give you more and more and more permission to go out there and do everything that we talk about. Work with people, work with your friends, family, on yourselves. Working on yourselves is important, to really test and do everything. I have the greatest laboratory in the world right here, and I have tested everything on myself imaginable. Every one of my formulas I've eaten, tasted, snuffed up my nose, and if anything seems too scary to do, I have Anisha do it. I was in my kitchen years ago, and I decided that I wanted to juice horseradish root. Let's put it through the Champion juicer. Why not? So I get the Champion juicer out, and I'm looking, and all I remember is I saw white spots, and I absolutely passed right out on the floor. And when I came to, I saw two things. A glass of horseradish juice, and Rocannon came in the door. And you've all met Rocannon. And I said, Rocannon, try this. Because I thought, I've already passed out. No way I'm drinking this stuff. I gave it to Rocannon. Rocannon thought, oh, okay. Drank it down and went, "Ooh-ah!" And threw right up. And as soon as he finished throwing up, a lady came in and he goes, try this. And it went down the line. So when you make things, try them on yourself first or your best friends. And that's where the real knowing comes in. Because everything I tell you is really just information that doesn't really mean anything or has no power until you put this stuff in your mouth and you experience what it really does. That's the learning that really takes place. So anyway, keeping it simple is a great key. Not getting too involved. The only time I get involved is when people are really dying. And then I still use simple routines, but a lot of them. I give them a full day's worth of work, 18 hours a day. And we're going to talk a lot about diseases, cancer, AIDS, immunological disorders, and everything from ingrown toenails to ulcers a little later on. So simplicity is a real key. Keep that in mind, and that will help you keep focused on, well, what program do I want to do? Keeping it simple. Change is important. I have three things I think about: simplicity, or KISS, keep it simple, change, and responsibility. And I want to talk a little bit about those and natural healing and what it means to me. And change. One thing that I realized a long time ago was that everything's changing. In nature, us, we're all in this involved in changing, this evolution. And everything's changing. Leaves are green, then they're brown, then they're dead, then they're dirt, then they're new plants. Do you know what I'm saying? Change is something that's inevitable. We cannot stop it. And everything that we know of is in constant change. We'll be different tomorrow. And what will depend on that will be what we do today. People come to see me many times that are very sick. They're vomiting and they have diarrhea. Is that a healing crisis or is that a disease crisis? I don't know. So I asked them, well, what'd you do yesterday? Well, if they said, well, I decided to juice fast and drank 14 glasses of carrot juice and meditated all day and exercised in the morning and the afternoon and night, then it's what? Healing crisis. If they say, well, it was my birthday party and my friends all took me out to a bar and I had a couple bottles of wine, smoked a cigar, and ate pizza, then it's a disease crisis. And I think that's the simplest way of figuring out what's going on with something is what did they do yesterday or the day before or last night. So when I'm looking at change, I know that tomorrow will be different. What that difference will depend on is what we do today. And so this is what really natural healing is all about, is changing what we do to change the outcome. I wonder why many of us are the same year after year after year, even though our body is supposed to rebuild itself. Why do we have the same sickness, the same disease? Because we didn't make enough change. Now, all my clients come to me and they say, well, how much will I have to do? I don't know. But I know it's somewhere between 1 glass of carrot juice and becoming a total breatharian and moving to the Himalayas. Okay? Somewhere in between there, their body will heal itself, right? I just don't know what it is. So I don't guess for people. I'm not a psychic. So I say we're just going to have to begin some work. And I try to adjust my program of what I start them on the severity of their disease and or where they are. You know, how far away from what I consider health are they? One thing that hurts this idea of change, that we're all changing, of course, is Hollywood. I live in the probably one of the strangest areas of the world, in Southern California, and Hollywood dominates not only the area I live, also the whole economy of where I live, but Hollywood really dominates the United States. We're all very brainwashed by this area, and 95% of my patients are involved in the entertainment industry in some way, shape, or form of another, all the way from movie stars and rock stars all the way down to people that operate cameras and sound equipment and write scripts and play rock and roll drums, all those things. And one thing that I realized is that this industry kind of molds us in this country. Our minds are formed by it a bit, unfortunately, and we're all brainwashed. And so I want to dispel a little bit of that because it's really anti-change. Well, what am I talking about? Okay, how about the cover of Cosmopolitan? The average age of a cover girl on Cosmopolitan is 16 years old. Okay, and middle-aged women in their 30s and 40s all over America are wondering, why don't I look like this? And so are their husbands. Okay, and they're wondering, well, why don't we look like this? Now, this happens to be a young woman who's barely out of puberty, and the average age of a print model 10 years ago was 21 years old, and today it's 16. I figure in about 20 years it's going to be sperm we're going to be looking at on the cover of Cosmopolitan if we keep going in this direction. And do you see what's happening? I mean, this is funny, but you see where we're going. This is not a woman. This is a very young girl. And we can't compete with that. And it's not just women. I mean, and also the surgeries. Most women that come into me that are involved in this business have had massive surgeries. I work on a couple presidents of modeling agencies in Southern California, and they say that the average 16-year-old that comes in for work has had 2 surgeries already, 2 cosmetic surgeries. And they also say that it's a real pain business nowadays because they have to have their moms go everywhere they go because the law is that they have to have a chaperone. And of course, what are the surgeries? Well, I read a poll in the LA Times that they polled 1,000 women, and they said that what would you rather have instead of the size and shape of the breast that you have now in the placement of your nipple? And all women were dissatisfied with their breasts. And breast cancer is the #1 cancer among women. I mean, think about that. I mean, what are we being sold here? And so, you know, we're sold all this about fat. I have women constantly coming to me in that business. They don't have their period, and they go, I want to have a baby, and I can't get pregnant. I'm not having a period. Well, they have no body fat. You have to have body fat to be healthy. And where I live, body fat is not hip. It's not cool, and you don't want to have body fat. And the surgeries are endless. From, you know, plastic going in here, fat being sucked out here. I say that people in my neighborhood have so much plastic in their body that when they die we should recycle them, not bury them. But it's unbelievable. And as men, it's the same. We don't, you know, David and I and the men in here, we have to compete with Arnold and Sly and all these people in the industry that aren't real either. Okay, these are not real people. I mean, Bill Shatner has more hair now than he did 25 years ago in Star Trek, right? I can't compete with that kind of rug. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, every one of my uncles looked like Curly of the Three Stooges. My family grew them 400 pounds and no hair. And that's what my body wants to do every day when I wake up. Get fat, lose hair. Okay, that's my genetic patterning. You know, many people get implants too, the men. And many men are on drugs. I work out at World Gym, Arnold's Gym, 4 days a week, every morning. And all I know is that one thing I've learned from there, and that whole system of bodybuilding and everything that we see about all these muscles is all drugs, is all steroids. And so us men, us women, we can't compete with this. And this is what we're sold. So what do we think? Well, we think we're defective, that these people are just the beautiful people. Well, they're the beautiful people once they get out of the doctor's office. And I see this, the hair dyes, the hair colorings. So I just wanted to share that a little bit with you because I live in the bulimia capital of the world, where you have to eat and then you have to puke it all back up because you can't stay thin if you actually digest the food. Do you know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to share that with you so you could see that change is something that happens naturally to all of us. I love David's gray hair. Okay? I think he's looking more distinguished. I didn't know there was anything really wrong with gray hair, but I tend to be a little bit out of it. And then I realized a month ago my brother dyes his hair. I didn't know that. My brother and I always thought that I'm just getting the gray hair and my brother isn't. Then he shared the secret with me, his Grecian formula or whatever it was. And I was like, why would you do that? And then I realized that many men my age are dyeing their hair so they don't have the gray. And I love it. I think it looks nice. I mean, why should we deny the way that our body's changing in all these beautiful ways? It's part of growing old. You know, it's part of maturing. It's nice. So anyway, change, and so we can change to be healthier. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about Hollywood because your lives are molded by it more ways than you know because we watch these movies and see these TV shows. And it's okay. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but always remember it's a fantasy. You pay your $6 or $7, you walk in, and this is a fantasy. There's nothing real about any way of this. Even if it says it's real or based on real, it's a fantasy. Watch the movie, and at the end it'll say this movie's a fantasy, that there's no human being that ever looked like this, that had this name. This is all a fantasy. You just saw a fantasy. So remember that. Lastly, responsibility. This is something that will help with you who are new practitioners. The one thing you have to remember is you're not responsible for these people. They come in your office and they have cancer and they've beat themselves up their whole life, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. They say, please heal me. You give them your best herbs. They die next week. And the family says, it's your fault. Okay? It's not your fault. You're not responsible for anybody but yourself. Okay? You're going to do your best job to help these people, but you're not responsible for them. And one of the things that I have to do with patients when they come to see me is give them back this responsibility that they want to place on me. And that's when I have this part here on my first page that says at the end, responsibility. You know, they've created their current health level. You know, if they're not driving their own car, I don't know who is, but I'm not. I empower people. I say, hey, you're in charge. You're in control. If you don't like what you see in the mirror, change it. Or enjoy it. Or love it. Or celebrate it. But don't look at me. I'm just a teacher. I'm just here to instruct, to teach, to show you a way of life that will probably help you out to where you'll be happier and healthier. But I'm not responsible. So if you remember that, it'll help you when working with other people, that you're not responsible for them. And it will help you be more effective if you share that with them and let them know that they're responsible. If sometimes they say to me, well, who's responsible? I go, look in the mirror. There it is. There's the perfect reflection. So responsibility is very important. I've never seen anybody plant strawberries and have corn come up. Okay, so you reap what you sow. I think that's a real basic. And so if you're not happy with what you've harvested, start sowing different seeds. Okay, let's eat some herbs. I'm hungry. How are we towards break time? Okay, why don't we eat an herb and take a break, something to chew on.
This is not going to be like the can, is it?
No. Not till this afternoon. No.
Right before the break.
No. Nothing I give you is anything that would make you sick, but you will feel different things. Actually, I'm just going to toss out some root here. And you can break that up and give some to the person next to you. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, break off a piece and then chew it up all the way in the back. Oh, yes. Here, I'll give you more. Here's a big root. Break a piece off about 1 inch, chew it up. This is a dried root. It was harvested this year, but it's a very dried root. So put it in your mouth, mix it with a lot of saliva, chew it, and let's see what happens. And let's take our break now. And yeah, it's a good time to take the break. And when you feel the first dizziness come on, no, we're going to taste something. This herb's going to create a taste in our mouth. So let's chew it. Remember, mix it with a lot of saliva, and then as you chew it, you got to squeeze it between your teeth, try to get any juice out, and we'll see. So let's take a break for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We'll come back and take a look at this plant a little bit. I think all of you got echinacea, and some of you probably know that. This was just some dried echinacea root. And echinacea, of course, most of us might know, has that ability to tingle. Sometimes some people feel it numbs. Some people say it feels almost metallic tasting. But it's kind of a sharp, tingly, sometimes numbing taste in the mouth. And it's one of the few herbs that does that or has that effect. Let's continue talking a little bit more about natural healing, and then we're going to go into the various aspects of it, like elimination. We'll probably start there. Let's talk a little bit more. When I think of the human body and what its primary function is, its primary function is really to keep us alive, to repair us and keep us going. It's an incredible machine that repairs and fixes itself and keeps us going. And, we can cut ourselves, we bleed, we develop a scab, we grow new skin, the scab falls off, and we're healed. And we don't even have to think about that process. That's the basic process of our body. It has a blueprint, an inane blueprint of perfect health. And it's always attempting to achieve that goal. And the only times that it doesn't achieve that goal is when it hits too much resistance. And that resistance is probably in the form of beer, hamburgers, bad attitude, and all the things that we've talked about which do not promote healing. But generally, our body wants to heal itself. So when we have cancer, which would probably be the ultimate in our body not healing itself and protecting us to the point where cells are malignant all over our body, that shows that for us we've had a great deal of resistance. Now, it might not be a great deal compared to someone else, but we're all different. This is something we really have to acknowledge, is that we are all individuals. We all have different fingerprints. We all look different. We had different parents. We're all individuals. We're like snowflakes. We're all perfectly different. And so what, for someone, can be enough decadence to give them cancer, for another person can be a breakfast of champions. Do you know what I mean? I was in England teaching, and there wasn't a phone where I was teaching this particular course, and there was a small house in front. So I went out and I knocked on the door, and this lady, I would guess close to 100, answered the door. And I said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" She said, "Yes." And I noticed that she was frying up some horrible glandular meat. It was about 9 in the morning, and it was a kidney, I think, because I could smell urine coming from it, which you can smell when you're cooking kidneys. And she also had there was some smoke from a cigarette or something was going, and I believe she even had a little bit of alcohol in a glass. So she was starting her day with cigarettes, alcohol, and red meat, glandular products. And here she was, almost 100 years old and looked healthier than me. And I asked her, I said, "Could I use your telephone?" And she said, "Well, I don't have a phone." So I knew that stress wasn't a factor in her life. But some people can live all types of ways and live to be very old. So we can't compare ourselves. That's where we fall in a pit with natural healing. Well, my uncle smoked and drank every day of his life and lived to be 100. Well, he was lucky. Okay, that's not the norm. Dr. Jensen used to say people like that are people who jump out of the Empire State Building, and as they're passing the second floor at 150 miles an hour, they go, I feel great. And I think that's a good example, meaning that, you know, nobody gets well on that kind of food. Johnny Weissmuller, who used to play Tarzan, won more gold medals in swimming than anybody to date. He was the fastest swimmer on earth, and he smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day unfiltered. Okay? But how fast could he have swum if he didn't smoke cigarettes? You know, some people can tolerate this type of lifestyle, but it doesn't mean that it's healthy. So we have to find out what'll work for us. Some people, 1 cigarette and they'll have lung cancer. Other people can smoke 2 packs a day for 40 years before they get it. So we're all individuals. That's an important thing to take a look at. Now, our body repairs itself, but we have to look at it and listen to it and recognize what's going on. I mentioned here, stop, look, and listen. That's a very important part of natural healing. America is a nation of drug addicts. Now, I know that we like to say, just say no to drugs, but Americans are swallowing, on the average, of about 160 million tablets of aspirin a day in this country. We're also consuming millions of tablets of pharmaceutical drugs, and we're also consuming well over 1 million gallons of hard alcohol. This does not sound like a nation that's really saying just say no to drugs, and it doesn't sound like a nation of people that want to listen to their body communicate, does it? It sounds like a bunch of people that want to numb themselves and hit themselves in the head with a hammer. And this is what most pharmaceuticals and common drugs are used for, in alcohol nowadays. So we go to a medical doctor and we get drugs. We buy drugs over the counter. We buy drugs in 7-Eleven, alcohol, tobacco, nicotine, aspirins. We numb ourselves. We dope ourselves. And this is why our children don't respect us. I went downtown Los Angeles to teach at Thomas Jefferson High School in Compton, which is the center of gang activity in California, maybe the world. Most people are carrying guns. I was one of the few unarmed individuals down there. And it's a horrible place. We get about 6 to 12 people killed every day in Los Angeles, especially in that area, just shot down in the streets. And I went down there, and the teachers were just saying no to drugs, and the 2 teachers I met were both alcoholics. You know, now the children don't respect them. Why? Because they're just drunks. Just because it's a legal drug doesn't make any difference. And yeah, absolute hypocrites. And so, you know, again, I used to drink. I used to smoke cigarettes. But we have to really look at this as these are drugs that are pushed on us by the legal pushers. I don't see any difference between the cocaine drug cartels and the coffee industry. I mean, look at it. It's a plant. Coffee's an herb. I use it. But it's to be used medicinally, and we'll talk about that later. Coffee is traded in Chicago in the futures. It's part of the economy of the entire world. If anybody were to make coffee illegal, we would see the coffee growers make the cocaine dealers look like kids. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's just legal. It's a legal drug in this country. But anyway, I saw that, you know, we use tremendous amounts of drugs. And aspirin, of course, is a big one we use to stop the body, to numb it, to stop fevers, to stop pain, to stop communication that our body's giving us. You know, this always reminds me of you wake up in the middle of the night, you hear the smoke alarm going off, you go over to it, you rip out the batteries, throw them in the trash can, and go back to bed. And don't look at where the fire might be in your house. This is the same thing we do with aspirin. We have a headache, we take dope, we numb it, and we don't look for what's going wrong in the body. There's a lot of reasons for a headache. I mean, it could be just tight neck muscles. It could be stress. It could be eyesight. It could be a brain tumor. It could be constipation. It could be indigestion. It could be subluxated cervical vertebrae. I can think of 1,000 reasons to have a headache. Why don't we investigate what those reasons are instead of just doping ourselves up and see if we can fix this to where we won't have another headache? But this is classical medical intervention, is numbing, drugging, doping. Reducing fevers is another use of aspirin. Do you know that for every degree of temperature rise in your body, your white blood cell, the speed at which the white blood cells travel through your body is doubled? This is called leukotaxis. So that basically means that if you have 104-degree fever, if your white blood cells are normally moving at 1 mile an hour, they're moving at 64 miles an hour through your body right now. That would be a 64 times increase. Do we want to reduce a fever? Fever is a sign that we have a bacterial, a viral, a fungal infection of some type, that our body has been invaded by an antigen or a pathogen or something that will create disease. Our body naturally raises the fever to fight it off. Our immune system is stimulated. The worst thing we could possibly do is stop that process. Most of medicine is about stopping the body's own natural process of dealing with healing itself. Most of what medicine looks at as disease and natural healing isn't disease at all. A fever is not a problem. That's why when someone told me their child had diarrhea here the other night at the dinner table, and they said they're running a fever, and I said, wonderful. Wonderful is my favorite word that I like to use. As long as you're doing good things and it's a healing process, it's wonderful. Oh, you have green worms coming out your ear, Mrs. Jones. Wonderful. It's a healing process. Your body's throwing this off. You have osteoporosis. Wonderful. I'm thrilled you have osteoporosis. This is not a disease. What medicine calls diseases are beautiful ways that our body heals us. And all osteoporosis is your body needs calcium constantly for your heart to beat, for your lungs to breathe. And if you run out of calcium, your heart will stop beating. Your lungs will not work and you will die. And your body knows this. So our body's a perfect scavenger. And so we have our thyroid and our parathyroid gland that check blood calcium levels all the time. And if we have too much calcium in our body, it puts it into our bones. And if we don't have enough, it takes it out of our bones and puts it back into our blood to be used by our primary organs, the heart and the lungs. If we don't have enough calcium, our body will just start dissolving our bones, and it'll keep going till we don't have any skeleton left in our body. And do you know that without a skeleton, we can almost still survive. But without a heart and lungs, we're good for 0 seconds, right? So is this a disease? Osteoporosis is the beautiful way the human body heals us because we're not getting enough calcium. So what's really wrong here? We're not getting enough calcium in our mouth that we can use. So we eat oyster shells. And we think that that's going to work. And most of your calcium products are made from ground-up oyster shells. But if we start drinking carrot juice, we'll notice that our blood calcium level rises. Use some kelp and some dulse and some sea vegetables. Our blood calcium level rises, builds back our bones, and we're okay. So osteoporosis isn't a disease. Osteoporosis is beautiful. If your body didn't give you osteoporosis, you'd be dead. So we have to start looking at things differently than the way they're described in the medical books. This is the top medical book for the diagnosis of disease, the Merck Manual, published by Merck, Sharp, and Dohme, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. It's been published for over 100 years. And we're going to look at a lot of the things they say in here over the course of the next few days and realize how, as natural healers, we have to get rid of this, okay, and get rid of almost everything we know. Someone said to me once, well, basically that's true, but everything you know is wrong. And I realized that almost everything we know is really what we've learned from either advertisement or the AMA or the pharmaceutical industries or the beef boards or the dairy boards. You know, in 1930, there used to be 12 food groups. One of them was sugar. After a while, people just wouldn't buy that anymore. So we don't have that anymore. But, you know, everything we learned in school was really just a sales pitch by beef and dairy industries as far as nutrition was concerned. You can go to any school and flip over those charts and you'll see the American Dairy Council or the Beef Advisory Board. They're real panicked right now. We'll talk more about that with food. So when we're looking at diseases, let's not get so freaked out and panicked and think, well, what's the cure for osteoporosis? Osteoporosis, again, is not a disease. It's the way the body heals itself. And we have to think of, well, how are we going to get more calcium into that person? One last thing I'd like to talk about with natural healing is we do not predict. Everybody's always asking me for a prediction. Well, how long do you think it'll take for my tumor to go away using this juice fast? Well, how long did it take you to grow it? This is always my response. I mean, most people's diseases have been in process for 20 years, and they expect that 3 days on my natural healing cleansing routine and they're going to be well. This usually doesn't happen. I have seen malignant breast tumors dissolve in 10 days. Okay, there's been some great miracles in my clinic, but this is not a program. This is a lifestyle for the rest of your life. I'm not saying, well, let's have some juices for a couple of days, a vegetarian food program for a few more, and some peppermint tea, and then you can go back to drugs, rock and roll, alcohol, and, okay, you can go back to rock and roll. And, but you know what I'm saying? In other words, this is a lifestyle. And so this is why I take my patients over a series of educational experiences over a period of time to teach them a new way of life, a new way to live, a new way to eat, a new way to move their body, a new way to think, so we can have a healthy person here. This is really what natural healing is an educational experience, much more than this, putting something in our mouth, because we're all looking for the quick fix. And natural healing is really that investigation. I had a lady come to me with severe migraines not that long ago, and I get patients like this very often. And she had been to the medical doctors, and they prescribed painkillers. It worked beautifully. The pain went away. It came back. They prescribed stronger pain medication, and it worked beautifully, but then the migraines came back, and they finally prescribed to her to go to a pain clinic where they did some biofeedback and acupuncture and things, and the pain went away, and it came back. And she finally decided to give up on the medical professionals. She then went to a chiropractor who said, well, her cervical vertebrae were subluxated. He adjusted them, and her pain went away, and then it came back. She went to an acupuncturist who put needles in her neck. Her pain went away, and then it came back. And finally, she went to an herbalist. And the herbalist gave her a great formula, feverfew, wild lettuce, valerian, and took her pain absolutely away. And then it came back. And then she came to me, and I think the first question I asked her was how often she had a bowel movement. I think it was once every 10 days. I gave her some intestinal corrective formula. Her headache went away and never came back. Do you see the difference? Everybody was paying attention to her head, where the pain was. And this is why we have to be good detectives. We have to ask a lot of questions about a person's lifestyle. And this is important. And this is why, as an herbalist, you can become what I call an allopathic herbalist, which means people come to see you, and they have pain, and you give them herbal pain formulas. And they have a heart problem, and you give them hawthorn berries. Now, we can still do those things, but at the same time, why do they have a heart problem? And that's what we're going to talk about when we get into food more. The other programs that are the foundation of natural healing, because before I'm going to really talk about herbs, I want to build the concrete foundation of this house and the walls and do everything necessary before we start putting the roofing shingles on. Does that make sense? Because herbs are just one of the fine-tuning, finishing products. And again, that's why this is called the School of Natural Healing. And that's why you have emotional therapy in here, spiritual therapy, exercise, and a food program. And if you haven't seen those, then you need to go back into this book, because they're there. And then herbs are what we use to just make this all happen, make this all work. So a lot of natural healing is education and sharing with people our understanding of natural healing and how to build themselves a good life. So let's start talking a little bit about that. Where do we start? Where's a good place to begin? I think the most important first step in natural healing and in helping someone heal themselves is getting the elimination channels to work. That's number one. Stimulating, toning, cleansing, healing, detoxifying the elimination channels. How many people have themselves or have known someone that started their carrot juice fast and in 12 hours had a headache so blinding they couldn't see and felt sick to their stomach? We've all done that. I've done it multiple times. Why is this happening? Because our body's filthy and the filth can't get out. And when we start a cleansing process, we're drawing out of our bloodstream, our muscles, our tissues of our body, toxins, poisons that have built up. We're putting them back into our bloodstream and our digestive tract, circulating that around our body, and if it can't get out, we get sick. And my first cleanse, like I mentioned, was Herbert Shelton's water fast, and in 3 days, I couldn't even walk. Why? Because I didn't know you had to go to the bathroom. Do you know what I'm saying? I didn't know that my liver had to be flushed out a little bit. So the first step that we need to do with everybody that comes to us is find out if the elimination channels are working, and if they're not, get them working. That's number one. For hundreds of years, natural healers have been obsessed with the bowel. Absolutely obsessed. And medical professionals have said that they're just sick people with fecal matter fetishes. Okay? Really. And, you know, I studied with Dr. Jensen, and I studied in his office for 3 days solid in 96-degree temperature down in Escondido. I sat through a slideshow of fecal matter. If we're talking about a man that's obsessed with bowel movements, here's one right here, Dr. Bernard Jensen, in his book here, Tissue Cleansing Through Bowel Management. You have more full-color pictures of poop than you've ever imagined in your life. And I sat through a lot of this. He would even bring out samples in glass jars. Natural healers, Dr. Christopher writes a whole book here, Rejuvenation Through Elimination. Every natural healer has been obsessed with clearing out the bowel and has said that because we have elimination problems, our bowels are plugged, we have toxins in there that accumulate, we get bowel pockets, and this can poison the rest of our body. And the medical profession has always said the same standard answer, that this is ridiculous. I've done numerous autopsies. I've never seen a bowel pocket. You don't get these encrusted bowels with stuff in them. And that this is all just a lie perpetuated by natural healers. How many have heard that from the medical profession? Yeah, I've heard that tremendously. So I think it's important to let's look at if this is a reality or not, and let's look at what the medical profession actually has to say about this, and let's see what their view is. And so we'll look under gastrointestinal diseases and see if they say anything that occurs in the intestines that sounds similar to what Dr. Christopher has been saying for a long time, and natural healers throughout the last 200 years. And there's a section in here called diverticular disease. And it says that diverticula are small, saccular, mucosal herniations through the muscular wall of the colon. They can occur anywhere in the colon, most frequently in the sigmoid, or the end of the colon. They vary in diameter from 3 millimeters to 3 centimeters, and they're present in 40% of people over age 50, which is now growing to almost half. So really, what are they telling us? That half the people in the United States, or almost half, have herniated sacs in their bowel, in their colon, okay? What we might refer to as pockets, these bulges in their bowel. Well, what do they say we can do about this? Treatment. A bland diet is not indicated. For normal colonic function, the diet should include a sufficient intake of fluid and roughage from whole wheat bread, bran cereal, whole fruits, and vegetables. This is a natural healing book. Local heat application, and it goes on and on. So basically what they're telling us is that almost half of American adults have herniated bowels, that these herniations are filled with fecal matter, and that if they want to fix it, they should get on a diet of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and grains. And you will never find a medical doctor that will know that. And this is one of the main books they're supposed to read and know. So I find that as natural healers, we are probably following the Merck Index much closer than most medical doctors I know. Because when I speak of bowel pockets or bowel herniations or fecal matter retention to medical professionals, as they stand there with their gut out to here, they tell me that that's just an old wives' tale, and that it's something that's been promoted by colonic therapists and natural healers. But that, in fact, is not true. And the best ammunition I get against the medical professionals is their own research. Okay? Yes?
What's the name of that book?
It's called the Merck Manual. Now, they also make a Merck Index. It's M-E-R-C-K, which, again, is Merck Sharp and Dome, the largest pharmaceutical, or one of the largest pharmaceutical industries in the United States. So I find that the best way to talk to medical professionals, medical doctors, is to tell them what their own books say. I was at a medical doctor's office the other day who is a OBGYN, a friend of mine, and I went in his office and I was telling him something about PMS. And he said, "Where'd you hear that?" And I said, "In the magazine in your waiting room. There was an article on PMS, and I was reading about it." If you're a medical doctor, you don't have time to do much except see patients. You certainly don't have time to read the physician's desk reference, the Merck Manual. Once you graduate, the studying's over. Now you're a drug dealer, right? So I think it's important to really recognize now. Another thing that's interesting is I have the 1955 copy of this, and it says that 15% of American adults over the age of 50 have bowel herniations. We've gone from 15 to 50 in about the last 25, 30 years. Pretty amazing. So, every natural healer has also written their main book or a big book on the bowel, cleaning the bowel, whether it's Pavel Arola, Dr. Jensen, Dr. Christopher, Dr. Randolph Stone, the founder of Polarity, Henry Kirshner, Norman Walker with the Norwalk Juicer. I mean, you can go through every natural healer and they'll talk about getting the bowel clean and open is important. Medical doctors still underplay it, even though the #1 cancer in America today is colon rectal, among both men and women as a control group together. Women have a higher incidence of breast cancer and men of lungs, but when you put them together as a group, colon rectal's #1. President Reagan had it, John Wayne died of it. We see it all the time, and still the medical profession is telling us that there's nothing wrong with their bowels, or with our bowels when they do an autopsy or they look at us. And the bottom line is this is just extreme ignorance on the part of medical doctors. And so the first thing that I just wanted to show you using the medical profession's own research and information is that, yes, probably if we have a group of people together, half of them have bowel herniations. And if you let that herniation go farther, the natural healers used to say, well, the toxins leak out of the bowel and poison the whole body, what Dr. Christopher used to call auto-intoxication, right? And the medical doctors always said, and still say to this day, that is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, let's see what they say about that. We'll go further to diverticulitis. Itis on the end of any word means inflammation. Inflammation of one or more diverticula, particularly leading to obstruction or perforation in the bowel. And it goes on to say here that a small, even minute perforation in the thin-walled diverticulum due to inflammation or high colonic pressure leads to bacterial and fecal contamination of the tissues outside of the colon. So what are they saying? The bacteria gets into our body, and now we're poisoning ourselves because our bowel is constipated, not working, and our bowel pockets are leaking, right? And again, this is something that natural healers have been saying for hundreds of years, And today, if you go to any medical doctor that I meet and discuss this with them, they'll tell you it's ridiculous, even though their research backs it up. And it's the same with the tonsils. I talked about the tonsils. The research now says not to remove them. I just saved the tonsils of a medical doctor's daughter that is my patient. And when he said, you got 2 weeks. This is what he said to me. She's 8 years old. She's had tonsillitis on and off and strep throat for 6 years. And her tonsils were swollen up almost the size of the red end of this microphone here, closing her throat. He says, you got 2 weeks. And he walked out of the office and his wife goes, what a jerk. That's what she said to me. And it's been about 8 months now, and her tonsils are down to normal, and she's doing fine. And we'll talk about that. But, and I mentioned to him about the tonsils being an important lymphoid aggregation, and he rolled his eyes. And then I gave him a copy of the immunology book, which is a standard text for all medical students now, and he still rolled his eyes. So the answer here, or what I'm trying to prove is, don't argue with medical doctors. Again, we're talking about a group of incredibly ignorant people that are led by greed, and so why have an argument with these people? You're not going to win. There's going to be no winners. So, you know, we were talking about that the other day. The best way to win a fight is to not fight. Okay? The basic principle of the martial arts is really nonviolence. It may not seem that, but really that's what we're working at in the martial arts. And then if you don't agree with us, we beat the heck out of you. So don't argue with medical doctors. You waste your time. Someone told me once, don't try to teach pigs to sing. You waste your time and irritate the pigs. I think that might be something we could think about when we're talking to medical doctors. So, and they know more bigger words than we do, right? So most people will think they're smarter. And there's always faster guns in the West, you know? You learn that in the martial arts too, but you learn that in all parts of life. You think you know herbs, there's someone that knows more. You think you know natural healing, there's someone that has it down better. So your job isn't to know everything. Your job is just to help people get well. So we got to get out of this ego. And so don't get in arguments with doctors. Every year in the United States, about 80,000 people are dying now of colon rectal cancer. It's the #1 cancer. I have for you in your handout book here a diseases of the digestive tract, an anatomical chart in every hospital and library, presented to you by the people that say that bowel pockets don't exist. And what do we see? This is one of the greatest anatomical charts of the colon you'll ever see. At the bottom right-hand corner in the sigmoid colon, what do we see? Diverticulosis of the colon, and it looks to me like a bowel pocket. And what do they show it filled with? What's medically called duty? Come on, we got to laugh a little bit in here. It's right at the beginning. I think it's 3rd page. Oh, 2nd page is a little story of mine, what is natural healing, to kind of prepare patients that come to me, what we're going to do. And on the back side is a bio of me, so in case you didn't hear enough about me, you can read this and it'll tell you a few things that I probably forgot to mention since I'm such an amazing person. So this is an anatomical picture of the bowel. Has a lot of nice things, but especially diverticulosis, so you can make a copy of this or write to the anatomical chart company. And then if you're trying to talk to someone about the fact that half of American adults have herniations in their bowel caused by fecal matter impaction, constipation, gas, bad foods, and Twinkies, here's what happens. 50% of people have it, and so that's why we're going in there with some fruit pectin and some of Dr. Christopher's natural Laxer Phenyl B. And that's why we're paying attention to this bowel, because chances are it's not in good shape, as you can see here. This chart also shows some gallstones and things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So again, the medical research is proving that this isn't correct. The medical anatomical charts are showing us that this is in fact correct. Your average medical doctor on the street will tell you that this is a lie. So I guess when they're doing their autopsies, they're probably drinking, smoking, taking their own drugs and aspirin, and so they're so numb they're not seeing these. I can't have any other explanation for why medical doctors tell me this is not true, that they don't see these things in the bowel. Also, they're not that easy to detect because really, where is a diverticuli? Outside of the bowel. On the inside of the bowel, when you dissect it, you may not even see the opening of the herniation. Does that make sense? So this is one of the reasons they're missed very often. I think I brought some slides with me of a dissected bowel and some diverticuli in case we want a spooky slideshow in the night. I think tomorrow night we'll have spooky slideshow.
I had a patient that had, coming out of her belly button, it looked like my arm, and at the end of it was round like my fist.
Yeah.
Right out of her belly button.
Yeah.
She was extremely obese. I had to bathe her, and it was quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, you let the body go for long periods of time, you don't take care of it, you get poisoned, and it can get very distorted. I see some pretty strange things in my office. The bowel, so we see that what our diverticulosis looks like. Diverticulitis just means that that sac, after sitting there with fecal matter in it, a popsicle you ate when you were 4 years old, whatever, is stuck in there. It becomes infected, inflamed, and then eventually will leak toxins into the rest of our body. This is one of my favorite books on the bowel, Dr. Christopher's Rejuvenation Through Elimination. I like what he says in here right at the beginning about unplugging and cleaning the sewer line, and how, you know, if you walked in your house and your toilet was overflowed, you have two ways you can deal with that. One is to burn incense, and one is to call Roto-Rooter or Dynarod. And the other way, you know, of course, is to deal with it correctly, clear out the toilet and fix it. And Dr. Christopher relates that to the human body on how we're burning the incense. We're putting on the perfumes, the deodorants, all the ways to smell because we stink. Well, what we really should be doing is cleaning our sewer pipe out, cleaning our body. I haven't used deodorants or any of those things for years, for 20 years. And if I stink, I take a bath. There used to be a commercial in the United States about using a detergent because you get ring around the collar. And Dr. Jensen said to me once, why don't people just wash their necks? You know, and think about it. I mean, this is true. So we need to clean out the sewer line. But what I really like here is Dr. Christopher says, never will we have peace as long as we have constipated warriors sitting around the table glaring with hate at each other. And think about that. You know, you don't have sweet thoughts on a sour stomach. When this whole organ is plugged up with fecal matter and it's not coming out of our body, we're not such loving people anymore. You know, I mean, look at old General Schwarzkopf there in our war with Iraq with his distended bowel out to about here, getting those military troops to go in. I mean, when you eat vegetarian food and you are healthy, you want to hug people more than you want to punch them in the face. You know, when we eat meat, we're getting all those growth hormones that are put in the cattle, and those make us angry. And of course, that's what we like to feed the troops, is meat. You know, get them strong, get them angry. And it just amazes me that in 1992, last year, the best way that we can deal with people around the planet is kick their butt. I mean, think about it. You know, I always have this vision that I always share of we have new elite forces, special forces of the military that have rainbow berets, and we drop them off at high altitudes at night over Baghdad, go in, capture Saddam Hussein and some of his people, hold them down and give them a colonic and a full body massage, and then lots of hugs and positive affirmations. And at the same time, when we do a tactical strike on Baghdad, we'd also do one on Washington and all around the world and get these world leaders happy and healthy. Do you know what I'm saying? Look at what's going on in Yugoslavia. This has been going on since time began. These people just hate each other and want to kill each other. This doesn't come from carrot juice, and it doesn't come from a clean bowel. And there are people all over this planet that are miserable, hateful people that their only thing they want to do is kill you. And I'm not saying we shouldn't protect ourselves against that, but I'm saying that I would think that we could spend these trillions of dollars and really start it being a more healing process than a more of a killing process. I think that there are other ways of dealing with these people who are obviously nuts, poisoned. They're so constipated that the poop's starting to come out their mouth when they talk, right? Yes?
Vietnam, the troops were fed speed.
Yeah.
The food.
Yeah.
What speed does chemically, it destroys the water function of the body and causes constipation.
Yeah.
You don't want troops out in the bushes pooping.
Absolutely.
You want them out there shooting.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. And, you know, so this is something that we have to share. Yes?
Before I started working at the herb shop, I worked at the state training school here in Utah where I worked with handicapped people. And after the little Iraq war was over with, we got a bunch of I guess modern day C rations that they were feeding the troops over there.
Yeah.
And what the troops were eating were those little microwavable top shelf meals.
Yeah.
One of beef and one of chicken. I think
Yeah.
were the only two they had. And we got a whole bunch of those that were left over. And the funny thing is most of them had expired before that war happened.
Mm-hmm.
The expiration date, I think, was
Yeah.
like a few months before the war itself
Yeah.
had taken place. But a friend of mine who also worked there and who was in the National Guard and knew a lot about what was going on was saying this is what they were being served over there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to protect ourselves. I mean, there are crazy leaders in this world. I mean, we had Idi Amin driving around Uganda shooting people and eating them. He was a cannibal. Okay? I mean, we have world leaders that have obviously gotten into power and gone off the deep end. And we need to protect ourselves. But I just think that there are other ways of dealing with the Iraqis than slaughtering 250,000 of them and burying them in the sand. Because, you know, these people, they didn't want to fight either. We just have world leaders that are crazy. And so we need to start getting those people healthy too, right? So I think it really starts with us. Okay, it really starts with us getting ourselves well, because dealing with things on a level so grand as countries and politics of the world is too much for any of this. I met a man recently who's an environmental activist, one of the top. He even produced a board game about saving the world. And he asked me to come over to his house, and when I went over to his house, I was trying to walk up his driveway, and I couldn't get up it. I was slipping in all the oil that had poured out of his car that was running down his driveway. And here, this man is a great environmental activist, but his household was an ecological disaster. Do you hear what I'm saying? So I think the first step is taking care of ourselves, healing ourselves. You know, I'm healing the environment. I'm reducing the paper that I use in my office. We recycle everything. We're doing our part. We're doing the best job we can, and we keep doing a better job constantly. Christopher Hobbs is a fanatic. He peels the plastic window off of the envelopes he gets and recycles that as plastic, and the envelope is paper. Do you see what I'm... So do you. We have more fanatics in here. This is important, that healing the planet starts in our house. We can stop a lot of things that we don't like. We can stop the slaughter of animals. We just stop eating meat. It'll stop. And it's already happening. 3 out of 5 slaughterhouses in California have gone out of business. People are eating less meat. We can put those industries right out. If we don't want to pay taxes in this country, we could stop it tomorrow. Nobody pay tax. You know, we can make any change we want, but we have to start with ourselves. Okay. Elimination. Let's get back to that a little bit here. How often do we have a bowel movement? Well, Los Angeles has the biggest school system of any city in the United States, and the LA City Health Book that's given to all high school students says it's normal to have a bowel movement once every 3 to 5 days. What? Yes, that's what we're teaching our children. Okay, pick up a health book. You'll be very shocked. One of the health books they use in high school. Dr. Christopher used to tell me about patients that had one bowel movement a month. And I thought that was a fish story. You know, I mean, I thought, well, you know, he's exaggerating. You know, I caught it and it was this big. And Then I started getting patients that only had one bowel movement a month. And people that looked fairly normal, you know, people that were thin, having one bowel movement a month. I remember one girl was only about 90 pounds, a model, wasn't even a bulimic, ate 2 meals a day, still had one bowel movement with her menstrual cycle every 28 days. But recently we had a record breaker in the clinic. In the last month, we had a woman who came in that had one bowel movement every 2 months. 6 bowel movements a year. Now, I'd worry if I only had 6 bowel movements and the week was half gone, right? And we're talking 6 a year. Magic. That's all. I don't know. All I can say is it's magic. That's what I do. Because I have a real good poker face. People say yes, and then when this tumor erupted out of my back, and I'm like, mm-hmm. And I try to not drop my jaw. And now people can say, I have a bowel movement once a month with my menstrual cycle. And I go, wonderful, and I write that down. But when she said once every 2 months, I did the same thing you did. I just went, ha, 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 ha. I did one of those. Because it's like, whoa, I can't even comprehend this. This can't be real. This is Houdini. And I don't know. I can't explain it. All I know is, yes, she was an attorney. That explains it. What do you call 10,000 dead attorneys at the bottom of the ocean? Okay, so she was an attorney. I don't think you can be a miserable person like that and you know, have a bowel like that and not be a miserable person. She was great attorney, very miserable person, and I did throw her out of my office and fire her after 3 visits, and I'll tell you why, and her file's in the bag. We'll talk about that later. So that's the latest and the longest I've ever heard, is 2 months now. She went, she had 6 bowel movements in 1992. And I talked to her husband briefly on the phone, and he was a pretty funny guy. And he goes, oh, yeah, that's her. He goes, she's got arthritis of the rectum. So I don't know what that was supposed to mean. Okay, so when we think about covering our body up with all these deodorants, perfumes, and things like that, I mean, hey, if you want to play with something, that's fine. I mean, what we do on Saturday night, New Year's Eve, and our birthday has never really counted much, right? I mean, I'm not giving you permission to go wild here, but it's what we do 5-6 days a week that counts. And if you want to put a little essential oil on or something, fine. But as if we're trying to cover up a stink, we ought to look at why is our body smelling like this. We live in an incredibly constipated, anal retentive society. That's the bottom line. My earliest memories of childhood were being constipated. My dad used to go in the bathroom with the Sunday paper and come out in about 4 hours, and that was his regime of having his weekly bowel movement. I remember when I would have a bowel movement, it would come out like a hard rock, and I'd never have to wipe because there wasn't anything on my butt. And my dad used to say, that's a good bowel movement, like it's wrapped in cellophane. I remember that was what he said, so I thought, hey, I'm doing good here. I remember in school, you had to raise 1 finger if you had to pee, and 2 if you had to poop. And if you raised 2 fingers, you were a jerk. So no one ever would admit that they actually had to move their bowels. And in my kindergarten class, it was just a door off the room. So if you went in there and you had any gas, don't even bother to come out, okay? Because none of your friends were your friends. Everybody was like, I don't know who he is. You know, if you had a fart or whatever, what would go on in there. And it's no different as adults. I mean, many of us have jobs where we cannot go to the bathroom when we need to. If you work in a bank or you work on an assembly line or whatever, you go when you have a break. And so we suppress our peristaltic action to where our bowel is dysfunctional and doesn't work anymore. I've had patients tell me that their children were told they can't go to the bathroom in school. And I go right down to the schools. I go right into the schools and I have a real heart-to-heart talk with that teacher or the principal, and I never have a problem again. These school systems need to be educated that aren't letting our kids go to the bathroom. I was out in Los Angeles. I had to go to the bathroom. I was in my bank. I asked them, can I please use the bathroom? And they said no. It's for security reasons. You can't come behind the counter and use the bathroom. I said, but I have to go to the bathroom. And they said, well, I'm sorry, you can't use the bathroom. So I went next door, and there was a retail shop, and I said, can I use the bathroom? And they said, no, our bathroom is only for the employees. I went next door. You know, I'm breaking out into a cold sweat now, right? The peristaltic actions gripping me. I'm kind of like doing one of these. There's a Mexican restaurant. I said, can I please use the bathroom? And they said, the bathroom's only for the customers. And I thought, if I ate this food, I wouldn't have to use the bathroom. And what this is showing us is that we have a problem with getting to the bathroom in modern cities. We don't have public restroom facilities, and if we do, they're the filthiest, dirty holes you've ever seen, kind of reflecting the constipated people that use them. It's different in some other areas. I know that in France, when I'm in Paris, there are public toilets, very clean, functional, space-age toilets you put a franc into, and you can go in and use the toilet. And they're really amazing. You put your franc in, and this door goes, and you walk in, and there's a white porcelain bowl with no pipe or no drain, just a white porcelain bowl. And I went in, and I'm like, oh, wow, is this a toilet? And I'm like, you know, having the peristalsis. And I thought, I got to go, but there's no toilet in here. There's just a white, dry plastic bowl. And I thought, it doesn't matter, I got to go. And I had my bowel movement in this white bowl, and then I heard people outside that were next, and I was embarrassed because I didn't know they're going to come in and I pooped in some bowl that is not, you're supposed to go in. And this is a true story. And I thought, I just got to get out of here. So I opened the door, and it shut behind me, and I heard a roar. All these scrub brushes, and sure enough, the person came in behind me, the door opened, and it was a clean white porcelain bowl. And so this whole wall changed, and it flushed this out, and scouring things hit the walls. It's quite amazing. And these are on almost every street corner in Paris. Okay, you don't find this in Los Angeles. We don't have really public facilities. How many times you go to the gas station and it says restrooms out of order? You know, it's because people's fecal matter is so hard they can't even flush it down, and the toilets don't work. I mean, really, this is a major problem in our cities. Yes, Reed.
I found that the best thing you can do is start working with your little children at home.
Absolutely.
I have a 4-year-old, and when he goes, he hasn't got to the age where he can take care of the last part of going himself.
Yeah.
I go and take care of that, and it's, you know, it sounds really strange, but I've got to where I'll say, that looks like a good healthy bowel movement.
Yeah.
And he's got never asked me, is it healthy?
Yeah.
Is it
Good.
healthy? Yeah.
Good.
And I'll tell him why. I'll say, you want it to be a consistency, you don't want it to be hard.
Yeah.
Or just things like that.
Absolutely. Beautiful, Reed. You know, I hear parents saying, oh, you have to make a nasty? You know, I mean, what kind of affirmation is that? We're making it dirty and bad and not nice to do, and we don't promote it in schools, and we're embarrassed of it, and all of that. So all of us have decided the way to deal with that is to suppress our elimination by holding it. Okay, we've all done that in here at some time in our life. And we hold it, and then after a while, our body doesn't have peristaltic waves anymore. Okay, so this is why all of us need to do some periodic bowel cleansing. Many people have in their bathroom what I call a library. They go in there and they sit down and they have the stack of magazines and books because it takes them an hour to have a bowel movement. I've had patients tell me all sorts of fanatical things. I had one patient tell me he had to tell all his relatives to get out of the house. He couldn't have a bowel movement with someone in the house. I know a lot of people that won't go in public facilities because they're dirty and they smell. We have all sorts of reasons, but people have problems with their bowels. I was just at a National Health Federation convention, and I had to go to the bathroom, and I went in, and I realized it wasn't much different even at health shows. And, you know, I can only talk about men's restrooms because I don't go in women's, but I'm sitting in there, and I'm having my bowel movement, and, you know, you have people next to you having bowel movements, and I'm listening. And this is the typical sound that you hear. You know, I mean, what is going on? Think about it. And then you hear this, you know, and you can hear these billiard balls coming out. And this is at a health convention. And one of the stalls didn't even have a door on it. So this really promotes people to be relaxed during their bowel movements, right? These bathrooms that don't have doors on them. And this guy was leaned over, and I thought he was going to have a cerebral accident because of the pressure that was built up the veins in his forehead. And you know, this is funny, but this is reality. This is what most people experience. So the question is should a bowel movement be like? You know, and this has been a big argument with health professionals, medical professionals, natural healers for years. And what I try to do is look at people in primitive settings that haven't been too culturalized and what goes on with them. And I find, you know, I've traveled down to Central America and all over Asia and all around the world, and I find that many people in what we call uncivilized or third world environments tend to have a bowel movement for every meal that they eat. And they tend to squat, okay, which is a much easier way to have a bowel movement, just getting down like this than sitting on the throne that was really designed in the Victorian era of England, where they did all sorts of things like blindfolded doctors to have them deliver babies and crazy stuff. So it's all about, you know, being ashamed and comfortable and all this. But I find that they generally have a bowel movement for every meal they eat, 2 or 3 a day. And the consistency is soft, something like nut butter, or maybe even formed but still soft. And you don't hear the grunting and the squeezing and all the problems that go on. But then there's lots of areas to have a bowel movement in the third world, anywhere on the planet, right? Okay, so this promotes people to go more often. Why do their bowels work better? Well, there's a lot of differences. I don't find Interstate 15, Ventura freeways, cellular telephones. You know, they don't have all the modern life stress that we have, which stops our bowel from working. They don't eat the processed food that we eat, which stops our bowel from working. If they eat animal products, they eat about 1/10 of your average American, which stop your bowel from working. So they don't live their life the way we do. We live our lives in a constipated fashion. Medicine has a way of dealing with severe constipation, and usually it's called colostomy or ileostomy, which is taking the bowel out, putting a hole in your lower abdomen, and hooking and gluing a bag to it. Here. Now, they don't do this all the time. Sometimes it's done after injury and an accident, but sometimes it's done with people whose bowels are so dysfunctional they actually start rotting and falling apart or become cancerous or some type of neoplastic disease. I meet lots of people that have colon bags, and basically all they're doing is wherever your colon becomes dysfunctional, they might stop it there, they cut a hole through your abdomen, they make what's called a stoma, and then you glue a bag to that, a plastic bag, you put glue on, you glue it on, and then your fecal matter comes out uncontrollably during the day into that bag. I have had many patients that were scheduled for colostomy operations that I stopped. Surgeons don't think of it as that much of as a big deal. I had a young girl, 15 years old, that was a daughter of a patient of mine. Before they met me, she had had a colostomy, which is very young for a colostomy. She was at a party, her first party, dancing with a young man. Her bag broke. The fecal matter spilled all over her dress. She went home and killed herself. Here's a simple surgery. Right? Another medical simple surgery. Medical doctors many times with their surgeries and their work don't take into account us personally, you know, and how we feel, the person. And I had an 11-year-old boy that was scheduled for a colostomy that I got to in time. And I was out of town at the beginning and his mother called. It was a Tuesday, and he was scheduled for a colostomy on Friday, 3 days. He hadn't had a bowel movement in months. They had removed some bowel material out of him, fecal matter, digitally with their hands and things, given him enemas, but his bowel had been very diseased and irritated. The nerve supply was dead to his bowel. And he was started on intestinal corrective formula immediately. In 24 hours, his mother said he had a bowel movement. She said it was as long as from her fingertips to her elbow. She said it was as big around as her wrist. She said it wouldn't flush in the toilet. She had to get a shovel out of the garage and break it up. And she said that it tore his rectum, that his rectum was quite bloody and torn. The long and short of it is this kid now is about 20 years old and has his bowel instead of having a bag on his side. Medical doctors many times don't think of the emotional implications. So it's our job as natural healers to really describe these things in detail to our patients, have pictures, tell stories, to scare them enough to where they won't do. See, the doctors scare them into doing a medical intervention. Most people, the doctor will say, well, we're going to take part of your bowel out, drill a hole through your stomach, and put a bag that you'll have to glue on for the rest of your life. And most people don't go, hey, yes, yeah! You know? People aren't nuts. They do this because they're scared to death. Because the doctor says that if they don't do it, they'll die some miserable, horrible death, right? Okay? So our job is to use some of that fear and start telling these people what a colostomy really is and what it's like. I mean, I have women that come to me, young women. One was 23 years old, scheduled for a mastectomy, a radical on one side. And I had to say, you know, what's it going to be like at the beach in a bikini? You know, Southern California, we're an outdoors group of people. Things are very exposed and superficial. I'll use any ammunition I can to get someone to stop mutilating themselves. And I'll say to people what it'll be like when you get married. Do you think it's going to affect your relationship with having a man? You know, it's nice to think that we can all rise above that, but most people's reaction is, ah! Right? Okay? That's reality. So I have to make these people get so sick they cry in my office and decide to go out and do something different instead of mutilating themselves. So I have pictures of those things. I have stories that I share with them. And I make them think long and hard about taking a knife to their body and doing what may be so-called a simple surgery. Appendix is a classic, and I do a lot of natural healing routines for appendicitis. So does David. He might have spoke about appendicitis a bit. I don't know if he did. Did he? Good. You know, in many states it's a law that it has to be removed with any lower abdominal surgery. Most people that come in, even if a woman has a lower surgery, maybe on the uterus, they take out the appendix. A lot of clients that come to me don't even know if they have one, because they've had a lower abdominal surgery. All the appendixes is another lymphoid aggregation, almost identical to the tonsils. It's a storage area for white blood cells. It sees if there's any contamination, bacteria in the body, and if there is, it excretes white blood cells and fluid to destroy bacteria. It's just all along our digestive tract, we have immune checks. We have the Peyer's patches in the small intestine. This is immune check area. It's a checkpoint. It's a truck stop. Let's check the brakes. You know, it checks our fecal content for anything bad. And if we have something bad in there, it will really increase our peristaltic action. So we have diarrhea, dysentery, get it out. It'll excrete fluids that are like white blood cells, macrophages that eat anything that will hurt us. So I've worked with a lot of people with appendicitis and help them get through it using natural methods, and I'll give you a few we'll talk about. I remember I was going for my first trip to India, and I had no money. And I really wanted to travel around the world, and I had no money, and a lot of my friends were leaving. And I thought, wow, I really want to put the energy out to get some money. And I think the phone rang at that second, and it was a woman, and she said, my boyfriend's in the hospital, and I'm at his bedside right now. He has appendicitis, acute appendicitis, and there's 3 doctors here, and they have all agreed to do surgery. And she had called Dr. Christopher and David, and they had referred her to me, which is a great thing about getting your thesis done and completing your work with the school, because once you are a master herbalist and you are out there, and David gets calls from all over the world all day long, he will refer people to you. in your area, if that's what you want. And I was referred this person, and she says, is there anything you can do? And I said, yeah. And she goes, well, what should I do first? And I said, bring him over to my house. And she said, well, I can't. He's in the hospital. And I said, well, how did you get him there? And she said, in an ambulance. And I said, well, just put him in a car. You know, bring him over to my house. So they did. I was quite surprised. And you got to be careful when you do that. And he came over to the house, and I did my appendicitis routine. And after 2 or 3 days, he was in the clear, and he was feeling fine, and he was better. She was the leader of one of the largest religious organizations in Southern California, and in the next month, my schedule was overbooked. And the long and short of it is I got all my money and went to India. But that was one of my first severely acute cases of appendicitis where this person's life could have been even threatened. So what do I like to do? I thought I'd talk about this a little bit, some of the things I do for appendicitis. The first thing, which I think is a general rule anytime you're not well, is stop shoving stuff in your mouth. I think that most people's illnesses could be cured by strapping their hands behind their back for 30 days and not letting do this hand-to-mouth work. I immediately had him stop eating. I think the first thing I do with appendicitis is stop eating and go to juices. Lots of juices, lots of liquid, a gallon a day of juices and liquid, especially some cathartic ones like apple, prune, throw a little of them in. And any type of juice, lots of water. Really what appendicitis is fecal matter has been pushed into the orifice of the appendix, creating inflammation. And this is one that medical professionals many times again said wasn't real. Here we have our picture on diseases of the digestive system, lower left-hand corner, appendicitis. What do we see? Fecalith obstructing lumen causing appendicitis. In other words, a piece of fecal matter from the bottom of the cecum pushed down into, because of the constipation and the pressure, into the orifice of the appendix, causing inflammation. So what's the medical answer? Cut out the appendix. What's our answer? Getting their bowels working. Okay. Now the one thing we want to watch for is creating a lot of pressure in the bowel, because it's already the pressure that's pushed the fecal matter into the appendix that's caused the appendicitis. So we want to be easy. Most people treat people with appendicitis like they're fragile and made out of glass. I don't. But we want to remember that the pressure has caused this. So by drinking the large amount of water and liquids, we've loosened up all the stool that may be in there, getting it slushy, and hopefully we'll wash that out. Immediate enema. Okay, let's get the enema in. At least do a rectal enema, if not a high enema. I don't suggest a colonic because colonic is pressurized. I do use colonic sometimes, but not in appendicitis. High enema is just fine.
What do you use on that rectal enema? Garlic or anything else?
Anything you want, really. You know, you can use herbs to relax or sedate, herbs to make them sweat. If you feel they have a bacterial infection and they have a fever, garlic is a good injection first, which would be the first stage of the cold sheet treatment. And sure, always, why just put plain water in? That's what I really learned from Dr. Christopher. But one of the things that Dr. Christopher did with herbs is started using them in every way, shape, or form that you could possibly do. You know, why give an enema unless it's an herbal tea? And so, sure, that's a great way that we want to do that. I like to use hot and cold hydrotherapy over the area. I like body work. A lot of people say, don't ever touch this area. You know, appendicitis is classically, if you find the iliac crest on your hip here, which is that bone, and your navel, and you dissect the line between the two and go about halfway, that's about where the appendix is, and that's where you experience pain with appendicitis, although it can radiate. So if you're doing body work and you know the appendix lies this way, and you know that the fecalith may be obstructing the lumen, as it says here, I like to do some upward body work. Now, I don't go in with the elbow, okay? There's different styles of body work, okay? I like to do some hot and cold, a hot castor oil pack that you'll see in the Dr. Christopher books, the 3-oil massage, but also just some light stimulation to start this bowel working. A great way to start peristalsis is just tracking the bowel with your hands. Nice tummy rub. Feels nice. Hot and cold hydrotherapy. And you'll find that the person will pull out of it. This idea that the appendix is going to burst is really not a reality. As you can see, the appendix gets blocked, stuffed with fecal matter, becomes irritated and inflamed and enlarges. But has anybody ever heard of anybody's tonsils bursting? Tonsils don't burst, they inflame and enlarge. The appendix is a lymphoid aggregation identical to the tonsils. Okay, sure, it could rupture if the fecalith stayed in there, more fecal material impacted into it, you kept eating meat and watching color TV, soap operas, sitting down like this. If you kept up the routine that caused the appendicitis, yes, you could rupture the appendix. That would spill fecal material into your abdominal cavity, poison you very quickly, and could kill you. Okay, so this is a life-threatening situation. But with most people, going backwards immediately, this is an emergency situation, you're able to heal the person just fine. So I just wanted to mention that as we were talking bowels. Constipation can cause all sorts of problems. I remember a very famous rock and roller in our country. His wife was ill, and she had been depressed and sick for almost a year. And she had gone to all the top clinics, Mayo Clinic, Scripps Clinic, anything money could buy. And they finally figured out what she had. She had a very rare virus that only 3 people in the world have ever had, and it's from New Zealand. Where do they come up with this stuff? What do they have, some like computer that'll spit out oddities? I mean, think about that. She had never been to New Zealand, never been out of California. And I just, this type of diagnosis is ridiculous. She came to see me. Actually, the first visit was at her house. She said, well, would you come over to my house? I'm very ill. I'm bedridden. I said, yeah. I went over to their house. Wow. What a house. Palm tree on an island in the middle of the swimming pool. Pretty incredible house. And she said, I'm just having breakfast. Would you like some breakfast with me? And I thought, fine. And I sat down, and it was about 98 degrees, July, Southern California, and she was having a bowl of oatmeal about this big. And sometimes I like to participate with clients to experience what it is they're experiencing. And I ate that bowl of oatmeal, and when I got done, I was like this. And I started noticing, I started looking just like she did.